Welcome everyone today. We have 3 items in the public meeting for Economy and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. It's important that we manage time effectively, so each item has been given 40 minutes for presentation, questions and answers. Do any members have any key lines of inquiry or questions about the report to raise in the meeting at this point? No? Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do is, obviously, my name is Councillor Yusra Hussain. I'm the chair of the panel. I'm going to ask all the members to introduce themselves and the individuals online on Microsoft Teams. And if the officers can introduce themselves when the reports come. Thank you. So we'll start off with Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Matthew McLaughlin from the Colne Valley Ward.
Tyler Hawkins, Dalton Ward Councillor.
John Taylor, Kirkburton Ward.
Martin Bolt, Murphy Ward.
Online, shall we start with Matthew? Matthew, is that you? Yes, sorry. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself? Anyone online?
Sorry, Councillor, saying that. Oh, that was.
Sorry, apologies. I think you're in the room, aren't you? Okay, you're online as well. Sorry, Will, could you just reintroduce yourself? Sorry about that.
No problem. I'm Will Acorn, the Head of Operational Services.
Thank you. Laura?
Hi, Laura Murphy. I'm the Democracy Officer for the Governance team.
Councillor Smage?
I'm Councillor Liz Smage. I'm Chair of Scrutiny in Kirklees.
Thank you, everyone. And I think we'll jump onto item 1, which is apologies and absences. I believe we received apologies from Councillor Afak Butt. Councillor Martin Bolt is with us already, and we've received apologies from Chris Friend and James Amy as well. Is there any further apologies to receive?
No further apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodie. Item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Can we agree that the minutes of the meeting of the Economy and Neighbourhood Scrutiny Panel held on 22nd of November 2022 be approved as a correct record? Yep. Okay.
Can I just add that Councillor Butt's attendance was missed off those minutes, but they will be added in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodie. Item 3, which is declarations of interest. Any members have any disclosable pecuniary interests should disclose their interest now. Anyone at all? No. Thank you. Item 4, which is admissions of the public. So all items are being held in public. So move swiftly on to deputations and petitions. Jodie, have you received any deputations or petitions?
None received, Chair. Thank you.
Item 6, which is public question time. Jodie, have we received any questions?
No public questions. Thank you, Chair.
So we'll move on to item 7, which is the ground maintenance current discussion. Can I ask Mark Woods to present the report, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Marika Woods, and I am the Group Leader for Parks and Green Space Operational Delivery, and I look after the grounds maintenance teams for the Council. So I'm just bringing today just a bit of an update on our current position as to where the grounds maintenance teams for the Council are. So I'm just going to run through a quick presentation, which is just covering off the points that are in the report. So a quick overview of what we do. So the grounds maintenance teams that the Council have provide all the grounds maintenance to the parks and green spaces within Kirklees. And we also provide a contract service to a range of clients, and those include homes and neighbourhoods, highways, bereavement, corporate facilities management, and we also do some external clients such as the SPE school contract and also some academy schools and CAL. We currently maintain the majority of green spaces within Kirklees, carrying out lots of different tasks that you would associate with the grounds maintenance. We're a relatively small team, so we're currently made up of around about 70 full-time employees, and that is also supported by seasonal staff during the summer months. We have a range of roles, from charge and gardeners right through to tractor drivers, and we also currently have an apprenticeship training programme, and we've currently got 3 apprenticeships that are going through that programme with us. Just a bit of an example, lots of people ask us actually what the quantities of work we do are. So we cut approximately 4.8 square kilometres of grass. We maintain 35 kilometres of hedges. We manage and maintain over 120 sports pitches. We look after 1,100 house gardens on behalf of Homes and Neighbourhoods. We maintain over 5,000 locations across Kirklees, and we've maintained 70,000 square metres of shrubbery. Along with the manual activities that you've just seen there, we also offer a range of benefits that are associated with the work that we carry out. We work with a lot of local people, so we work with in bloom groups to help small towns and villages flourish. We work alongside friends of groups in many of our parks to ensure that we're all working towards a common goal. But also we work with lots of groups such as Transformers North, Supports Recovery and many others to provide people with practical work experience, which also helps benefit the work that we do, but it can also help support people back into employment as well within the district. We have our Green Flag Awards. We are lucky enough to have 6 green flags across Kirklees at our primary parks and country parks. And we're continuing to work with partnerships across the board to continue keeping those high standards in our primary parks. We also help contribute to mental health and wellbeing, and that's really been picked up in the last few years as we've been through some really difficult times. But actually, we provide people with free and openly accessible green spaces that they can enjoy, which has proven mental health and wellbeing benefits. We are also working closely with partners to try and create networks for biodiversity, and we're looking to increase connectivity amongst our green spaces, which all helps towards our climate change agenda. Some lovely, if it comes up, there are some really nice photographs of some of the lovely work that we do, and it's the over and above parts of the job that actually sometimes are less visible to people other than just the grass cutting. But we obviously, we work with lots of communities to help make their spaces better. Along with those benefits, we also have a lot of challenges. So the team is currently really struggling with the recruitment. Our ability to attract and recruit new trained staff is actually decreasing. And we are trying to counteract that through our apprenticeship scheme and trying to bring people through on these training schemes and working with communities to help. But we also have an ageing workforce, and we do need to successional plan for that. We have some members of staff, we've got 2 current members of staff that have done 50 years service with Kirklees Council within our department, which is quite outstanding. Our budgets, we don't have a central budget which supports parks and open spaces. We are an income generated service, and we do that through our SLAs with our partners, such as K&H and Highways and People. And that covers all of our GM work. One of the challenges that we are going to face is the potential, obviously, in the current economic climate, is we could have a reduction in what our clients can actually spend with us. So that's something we're just keeping an eye on. Machinery is always a challenge. We have budgets within our transport services are being stretched, which is leading to delays with purchase of new fleet and machinery. It's not just a local issue, that is obviously a national issue around that. And we are currently looking at options to ensure we have correct machinery to look at how we might maintain our sites in future. We also have found that we've now got a gap between the expected service standards that people expect us to provide and actually what we're resourced to do. A few years ago, the budget was reduced for grounds maintenance, and with that, we brought our service standards down. So there's a lot of people will be aware of our gold, silver, bronze standards. But the gap between the work that we're expected to do and the work we're scheduled to do is approximately 33 full-time employees during the summer months. So we are quite a stretched service, and we are trying to achieve that expected level, but it is very difficult with the resource we have. So like I've said, with the service standards, that gap has opened up, but there has been this creep over time. So a lot of the bronze sites, which were meant to be cut monthly, there has been creep on that, and people are expecting us to cut that grass, say, fortnightly now. which is pushing our teams beyond the capacity that we've got. We also have an issue around new areas to maintain. So we currently don't have the machinery available to deal with new ways of working, such as cutting long grass or wildflower maintenance, which means that if we were to do that, we have to subcontract that work out to other people at the moment. We also have a number of new sites that are added to our portfolio regularly, and they don't come with that additional revenue to maintain them. It's expected that we would pick that up within capacity. Along with that, there is decrease in Section 106 revenue coming into the council through the planning applications, with developers more often than not now choosing to use management companies to manage those. And that was a big source of income for our service area. So we need to look at what we can actually do with the resource that we've got. So as an interim measure, we want to keep working to our agreed standard, but actually to look at combining our silver and bronze categories into one standard. So this should hopefully allow some flexibility so that we can continue providing people with a service and a decent service at that. So what we'd be looking at is keeping our gold standard for our primary parks, crematoriums and our town centre spaces. And that's looking at cutting the grass on average every 2 weeks. Obviously, it's always weather dependent. Keeping floral displays and shrub beds and things maintained as they would be, but looking to combine that silver and bronze category. So that is our secondary parks, our recreation grounds, verges and cemeteries. So we would be looking at cutting our grass every 3 weeks on average, which is a change currently from the 4 weeks for the bronze. So we're actually limiting it down. We'll limit our planting areas, so we may look to reduce some of the bedding plants that are provided, and we will look to trim our shrub beds and our hedges once each year. And natural areas will continue to be maintained as they were previously designated. So as part of that as well, of all the work that we're trying to do, some of the things we'd really like to do is to start pushing out some key messages. We need to create a comms plan, and as part of that, we'd like to help push information out to the public to alleviate our workloads and reduce complaints and expectations. So this will include updating the council's web pages with more specific information. Some of the key messages that we'd like to push out to the public are: take your litter home, clear up after your dog, why we maintain the areas the way we do. So if we are having a naturalised area, actually letting the public know why we're doing that and what the benefits of that are. And also, again, reiterating that service standard. So what can the public expect from the grounds maintenance teams that are coming out? For example, cutting the grass every 3 weeks. I'm just going to take a sip of this. So looking forward to the future. Looking at initiatives and improvements. So we're going to be looking to map out our network of spaces, to link in with other initiatives to create a wider network of increased biodiversity and habitat creation. We need to invest in more efficient machinery so we can carry out a wider variety of maintenance tasks. And improvement in some of the back office systems that we have, which should hopefully help us get a greater knowledge base for decision making going forward. We also want to enable and empower our communities and our sports groups. So looking to support groups across the council and promote them so that we get more people actually active in their spaces, taking that ownership. And also looking at sports clubs to take on more ownership of the land that they use, and actually looking at the refurbishment of some of those sports pitches and accessing funding. And then finally, we would look to realign the service standards and budgets. So we need to look to realign how we maintain our spaces in line with the budgets and the resources that are available to us. And this will be done gradually, using data and knowledge to shape a new service standard. And this work will come back to scrutiny in future months to update on progress and direction. And we will work within the parameters of our emerging Parks and Green Spaces vision. So that's it.
Thank you for your presentation. Just to congratulate the individuals that have done 50 years service, that's an incredible achievement to stay with the council for that long. I think that's a testament to say what a good working environment we have and culture, so well done. So we can open it up to questions, and I believe Councillor Taylor would want to ask the first question.
Well, questions and comments. Firstly, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the work that you and the team do. I'm just going to echo what you said about the 50-year service, but just ask a question around it as well. Do we do something to celebrate that? Do we reward them in any way? I mean, it'd be nice to embarrass them at a council meeting and present them with something. So perhaps, I'm sure you guys can come up with something creative, but I think we ought to recognise that, and I think it does reinforce that point about, you know, this is a good employer to work. I think it's amazing somebody stayed 50 years anywhere. Certainly perseverance. Couple of comments, questions. One, I fully understand the challenge about recruitment and, you know, so that succession planning piece, and you made comment about apprentices. I've met a couple of apprentices in the past, and yeah, that's absolutely part of the way forward. Also, alternative provision from education is another solution, and I think and I'm not sure whether the groups that you mentioned, like Transformers Northern Support to Recovery, whether that is alternative provision or that's older people perhaps dealing with other issues, but certainly we should be looking, because alternative provision for children who are youngsters who are at risk of being excluded from school, often what they want is something that's more practical, and you can see then a career path into an apprenticeship and into working for the council. So I think that's certainly something we should be exploring if we're not already doing. As always with these things, there is a bit parochial from me. There's a small charity in my ward called Sunshine. It's either Sunshine Sunflower or Sunflower Sunshine. I can't remember which way around it is. It's one or the other. They have been trying to engage, and they've been volunteering to, you know, work with the students that are doing the alternative provision with them to perhaps do some of the maintenance for us. It just seems to get stuck in the going round and round and nothing happening. So I wonder, Graham, if you wouldn't mind picking that up and seeing if we can, because I think it's an ideal model of bringing these students who are at risk of being excluded from school because they don't enjoy the academic side, but are very creative. And here's an opportunity to help us with our you know, recruitment challenge as well. So I think that there's a great win-win out of this. Then my other comment, my concern about, I understand where you are, the bronze silver merging, and yeah, it's not what anybody wants us to do, but it may be where we end up. I do have two worry beads about it though. My first one is about recreation grounds, because if they're being used for football pitches, I don't think we can be saying we're going to reduce the amount of time we're going to cut the football pitch. I assume we're not saying that. I assume we're talking about the areas around perhaps the pitch, but if I can just seek clarity on that. And then the other one is on verges, and I can think of some patches in my own ward, and again being a bit parochial here, but where you've got a grass verge that is between the road and the footpath, and then the other side of the footpath there's another grass verge. Sometimes if they're left too long being cut, particularly as we have had in the last few years where you've had quite sometimes very strong growth, they're almost impassable. So I fully get that we need to perhaps look at, you know, sort of managing within, cutting our cloth accordingly within the budget we have. But I think we just need to be sensitive to some of these areas where perhaps it might be, yes, on paper we only want to do it every 3 weeks, but if we've got spurts of growth, we just need to look at those road safety issues as well, because we can't really have the footpath unavailable and therefore they're walking on an A road. So they would be my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Anyone want to respond? Graham? Graham, yep.
Yeah, hello, my name's Graham West. I'm the Service Director for Highways, Street Scene and Waste. I think what I would say, Councillor Taylor, is thank you for your comments, particularly around the 50-year service. Absolutely crucial that we recognise those type of people, and that's something that we have been discussing already. Regarding the Sunshine charity, I think it is the Sunshine. Mark Ferris is already involved and engaged with the Sunshine charity in your area, but I will ask for a bit of feedback and update for ourselves, if that's okay. I know that is very localised to yourself, but I'll ask that question particularly. Football pitches, recreation. One of the comments there from Marika was the fact that, you know, trying to work with football clubs in order to give that extra benefit. So we might have a service level where we cut at one level, but if we can encourage, work with them, provide tools, equipment or otherwise to increase the level of standard, then that's where the direction of travel needs to be. And I think there is a move now to look at more opportunities for volunteers to help and support across, what is a significant borough. And, we've heard of the amount of hedgerows that are being cut and the spaces that are being cut. And I am working with Natural Kirklees, and they are really, really keen to engage with us even more. So I think that is a positive direction of travel to supplement, support and add to the services that we can provide in the future. Regarding road safety, absolutely. So one of the customers that Marika's got is our highway service. And again, that as a client, they will decide what level of service that they want Marika to do. And then they will pay for that particular level of service as well. So that's the type of trading account and the commercialisation that we've got within that service. So thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, do you want to come back to that? Or?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. On the football pitches, I agree where you're coming from. I think we just need to be mindful. I'm aware of one issue that we've had in one of the football pitches in my ward, where the club did step up to start doing some additional cuts, and then they were dumping all the grass at the end, at the edge of the football pitch, and we ended up with a right mess where, over time it started degrading and it made the area unusable, and that area was previously being used by for extended children play. So I think if we are agreeing that with clubs that they're going to do extra, we need to make sure that we're thinking about what's happening with the grass cutting and things like that, the cut grass. And the second one, this is me reflecting, but in addition to the alternative provision and the engagement with the education teams about any opportunities there, perhaps another one to look at as well is within the communities world in terms of Community Plus and with the social prescribing, where we've got people that are looking for perhaps either it's on the loneliness agenda or it may be to do with their health, either physical or mental, that actually they're looking for some outcomes, and maybe we can connect up with that as well. So that's perhaps another area to just make sure that they're aware that there are opportunities within the service. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to Councillor Matthew, and then Councillor Smidge, and then Councillor Bolt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for the presentation, and absolutely echo all the comments. And anybody that's served 50 years deserves special recognition from the council. That is extraordinary. Just a few sort of questions, really. One about staffing. It says that you've got 70 full-time staff, and that's supplemented by seasonal workers in the summer months. The council obviously currently has a recruitment freeze in place. Is that likely to affect the hiring of that seasonal staff this season? And if so, are you working on putting contingencies in place in case they can't be found or funded? Second, I wondered if you could elaborate a bit on the work you're doing to encourage biodiversity wherever we can. As I'm sure you're aware, we have an absolute crisis on our hands in terms of invertebrate numbers in this country. So anything we can do within our resources to encourage wildflower growth, the bee population and all other kinds of creepy crawlies, they need to be helped, and I'd like to know what we are doing to encourage that. And finally, just a kind of suggestion, but it's from the presentation it sounds like you've already had the idea, which is if there are spaces that could be just rewilded and left alone that aren't currently, that might be a way to save on costs, maintenance costs, but it sounds like you've got quite a few areas like that anyway. So those are my comments, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Matthew. Do you want to come back? Graham? Yep, sure.
Okay, thanks again for your comments there. Recruitment freeze. So whilst the council has got a challenge around recruitment, we've not necessarily got a freeze full stop. We set up some months ago now a people panel, and all posts that we are looking to recruit to or otherwise are firstly assessed by the strategic director. If then it's considered that there's a business case to move that forward to the people panel for consideration, then that's what we do and we present every week. So we are still releasing positions, and it will be no different in that particular area, that we will take recognition of the post, and then if we can fund it, and if it is an essential service that we want to provide, then the recruitment will go ahead. The other thing from a seasonal working point of view, advertisements have been out and around, but we have found that to be more difficult this time, because I think with the cost of living means that people are wanting more hours than they would have normally wanted in order to meet the challenges that we're all facing around fuel, energy and so on and so forth. So that's why we've been pushing more readily around apprenticeships, and some of the suggestions today that we've heard as well might give us a further opportunity. And what we do in this particular building as well, any apprentices and any new starters, then myself and the strategic director, we meet and greet with them. And I think that is really just showing the commitment that we're giving to staff all the way through our service areas. Biodiversity, you want to pick up anything biodiversity-wise? Thank you.
So if I just pick up the biodiversity mapping, so it's sort of forming a bit of a network that we're doing anyway around the biodiversity net gain work that's happening at the council, also woodland creation through the White Rose Forest, and it's about making sure that our spaces fit in with that. So like you say, looking at actually, have we got areas that we can just rewild? We don't have to closely mow grass everywhere, but that's part of this future plan really, is to make sure that when we do look at that, we're making sure we're doing that in the right places where we get the most benefit from it, rather than doing it in an arbitrary way and just saying we're not going to cut X bit of grass because that's a cost saving. So we're trying to look at it a bit more holistically this time and actually make sure that where other work's going on in the council, that we can actually work together and map that out to make sure that we're making the right choices in the right places. So I think that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Do you want to come back to that, Matthew? All right, okay, so we'll move on to the next question from Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Chair. Service standards. People expect the service standards to be followed. I think you mentioned, Marique, about people's expectations. But across Kirklees, there are cases where your service standards have not been met in a number of places. And so I'd like to ask, with the putting silver and bronze standard together, will you be able to meet those standards going forward? When the standards were initially put in, you did a lot of consultation on that, and you haven't mentioned about any engagement with changing the silver and bronze. So I'd like to know what you plan to do. Are you going to talk to councillors? Are you going to talk to groups that you work with across Kirklees at the very minimum? You also mentioned about support for different groups. Well, you don't have staff in place across Kirklees. You have staff in place in some areas of Kirklees to support groups. So what is going to be done about that? You also mentioned about rewilding areas. Well, rewilding areas, you did last time. You reduced recreation grounds. You reduced the size you were cutting in some areas, but now you're planting trees on recreation grounds. And so therefore you're reducing, if the tree plans go ahead without any interventions, you are reducing the playing areas for people. On the recreation grounds, there's both informal play and you take bookings for recreation grounds. So if you are reducing the cutting space from weeks that you're cutting the grass, how is your booking system going to work? And what about the informal play for the youngsters? They shouldn't have to play in grass that gets too long. Where is the playing pitch strategy? That was last done in 2015. I understand that the update is not yet done, because that would go with how many playing pitches we need, how many recreation grounds we need to keep, and the fact that you're trying to plant trees on quite a lot of recreation grounds at this moment in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Who would like to take those questions? Graham, okay.
Hello, Councillor Smage. Are you well? Good.
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, let's chat around the service standards first. What will I say on that particular area? The staff are committed every day of the week to provide the best service that they can do. The challenges are clear within the presentation, that we are struggling on a number of areas. 33 full-time equivalents is a sizable gap, but I can confirm that Marika and the team are absolutely trying their best to develop the service standards that they can. At this time, the Council is reviewing its general fund position. Now, there are lots of ongoing discussions around what level of funding can be made available, and that's yet to be decided around a number of service areas. If and when that is completed, then clearly, if we are altering any service standards, there needs to be an engagement, yeah? And I've used the word engagement as opposed to consultation because it is living within our means. This is the level of service that we can provide, and I've already said that we need to supplement with, where possible, other people, volunteer groups, community groups, charities, and more. But I think also, just reflecting on the messages at the end of the presentation, take your dog waste home, you know, pick your litter up. That will all benefit, because every time we're doing that, we're not cutting the grass, we're not providing the levels of service. So there is a complexity around getting people to help us, getting others to help us, and for us to do the core piece of work that we're trying to achieve. You asked several questions there, Councillor Smage, so I'm just going to let me pause. Regarding the play pitch strategy, I had a discussion probably a couple of weeks ago now regarding where are we with the play pitch strategies. So it's not led by my service area, but I am, like you, very, very keen to work with our colleagues in public health and other areas to get the play pitch strategy over the line so that we can understand what we need and what we need to do and the levels of service. So that's the response to two of the questions. Support, coordinators, and then the real wilding element. Do you want to just pick those up for me, Marika? Thank you.
Around the support for Kirklees groups, within grounds maintenance, obviously where the grounds maintenance teams can, we will support any local group where we possibly can. We are aware that we had some gaps, particularly last year, in terms of our recruitment, and it is fair to say that as well as being 33 full-time employees short on the expected service standards, we're currently running at about 20% vacancy level at the moment. Unfortunately, sometimes that all comes in one area, which it just puts us under enormous pressure. So we are always there, and we do wherever possible try and support a lot of groups and a lot of communities to make their spaces better. But yeah, it is something we've struggled with a little bit. In terms of rewilding areas, I don't think at the moment we're looking to change any of the way that we maintain, other than to reduce some cutting and speed some cutting up with the 3-weekly cycle that we've got. But we will look in the future, but like I said, that's about making sure we're making the right decisions in the right places, so actually mapping spaces out and coordinating things together. The council owns quite a lot of green space and we cut an awful lot of grass, so it's not just about the recreation grounds, there are some other random bits of public open space, and it's just about looking at what those how they all link together and where we make the right decisions. We don't want to do it where we just stop cutting certain areas. And I think the thing around changing the standards at the moment, it's just an interim position, given that the resources that we've actually got available to us. Our other option is to try and continue, but knowing that we won't achieve, so there's be areas that won't be cut at all. So I think we're just at the moment trying to keep ourselves at a level position where we can keep maintaining our spaces as best as we can until we know where we're going to be. And once we work up any proposals, like Graham said, the plan is around engagement, and it is around, you know, coming back to scrutiny and working with members around that as well.
Thank you. Next person to make questions and comments, unless Councillor Smage wants to come back with anything.
Yeah, just clarify about the tree planting on recreation grounds, because we've had to have a number of conversations about this. And so I think there should be some coordination, better coordination about recreation grounds and what is needed in an area. But on the engagement, can we ask that it does indeed come back to scrutiny about the engagement on the service standards, and that actually there is an engagement plan? I understand about temporary change, but can we ask that it does indeed come back to scrutiny and there is an engagement plan for any proposal to change standards in the future? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joe Robertson, the Woodland Development Manager. So just to pick up on the tree planting on recreation grounds, I know we've had some conversations, Councillor, about this. We are consulting with local ward councillors, local communities about this to bring up any issues in terms of the designs. We are consulting with development colleagues in parks who are looking at the playing pitch strategy. Some of the conversations we've had recently has been as a result of those consultations, and we are amending those designs as needed. The council has committed to the White Rose Forest, and we are committed to increasing our canopy cover to 19%, and that does mean some of our land has to go under tree cover. For the benefits that does bring to communities, and we are, in terms of the playable aspects, it's not removing the play from those areas, it's just maybe changing some of the play, changing some of the interactions that young people can have in those areas. Certainly a lot of the schemes are having some of what we're calling edible woodland aspects to them, so these are informal orchards where you're going to be supported by information boards to try and engage with people, engage with communities, engage with the children about what they can eat, what can grow on our trees, etc. So there are a range of benefits. We are going through a consultation process as and when sites are being made available to the woodland team, and we are having conversations with councillors to make sure that those designs fit around those recreation grounds.
Thank you. We'll move on to comments and questions from Councillor Bolt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and apologies if I have to leave. I'm expecting a phone call that should have come before, but if it comes now, I'll have to take it. The Section 106 that officers mentioned, yeah, it does represent a decrease in income, but alongside of that, there would be an element of expenditure. So what is the actual net situation that we've had? Because to prepare a 106, the legal staff in Kirklees would have had to have input. And so have we been making a profit off 106, I suppose, is the question, because otherwise the net result is the same. Sports clubs, I know many have been stepping up to the mark for some time. Cricket clubs in Murfield have been having a hybrid situation where they've been maintaining the wicket, the square, and Kirklees have been maintaining the outfield. I suppose that's something we've seen in many things with petanque courts and things like that. As things have come up, community clubs are. Picking up on points that have been made, I hope there will be, where we're seeking more third-party involvement, service agreements. So we know what to expect in terms of outcome, and also that if a club or organisation is maintaining an area and they may have rented space off us, do they get a decrease in the rental to compensate for either the physical or financial input that they're making? And do they get any greater ownership? Because the other thing there about using voluntary groups, when we've talked about it on winter maintenance, is there's an element of insurance and PPE and safe working practices from them. So it's a long way to go. Grounds maintenance, also, I'll touch on here, maintenance of our greenway network. I've had contact from residents. The Spen Valley Greenway, Kirklees used to give money to Sustrans to fund a ranger. I believe that stopped. So how is one of our most important active travel routes going to be maintained? And on other areas, such as the Calder Valley Greenway, from Dewsbury through to Huddersfield, elements of that were never maintained, despite it being in a planning permission that you should have had an equestrian service, you should have done this. So what we see now with lack of maintenance is active travel corridors through winter are actually dangerous to users. So that, again, tribute in here, it's mentioned of services working with In Bloom groups, and I'd like to thank officers for working with Murfield In Bloom, which made them one of the most successful groups in Yorkshire and represented Yorkshire nationally. So partnerships do work. It talks about new fleet of machinery. I don't know if there's any element of this being able to go to electric vehicles and therefore linking in with other council initiatives. That's something that obviously would work well. We've had community planting in Murfield, and I hope others would look at that. Knoll Park, we had a community coppice and orchard, which is a mixture of trees, and hopefully in time that will mean that there will be fruit and things like that, as well as providing a natural barrier. It's going to be challenging for communities, and I'm sure that many will step up. And another option, declaring an interest, and John's got them in his area as well, is we've got parish councils. They have the opportunity, should they wish, to step up to the plate and take on some of the burden for their communities if there's an agreement with Kirklees to do that. But again, that's an issue. There'd have to be some kind of an agreement about if a parish council is taking on management, what does it get in return? But it's going to be interesting times. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Does anyone want to take those questions? Okay, Will?
Hi, I was just going to pick up on the Section 106 element of this. So there was a time when Section 106 was the standard position for developers, and this involves a calculation over a 10-year period of how much it would cost us to maintain a certain site. That comes across in a lump sum that's held by the authority, and then we draw down the annual amount each year to maintain that site. What we've seen, though, is once the period ends, it then transfers across to the authority and it's adopted, and then it's at our revenue cost to maintain that. Over the last 10 years, that has seen essentially almost the same amount coming in as being going out, so there's been a sustainable position financially. So we've had a confident way of moving forward in budgeting terms. What we've seen over the past 2 to 3 years is this has started to decline. There's been a move more towards creation of management companies rather than the paying of the lump sum. What this means is that we've got a declining pot of money, which means that each year we are seeing a growing revenue pressure come across the authority. At the moment, we draw down in the region of £200,000 to £300,000 a year. We have about 2 to 3 years of funding left before that revenue pressure fully emerges into the authority, at which point, obviously, we will need to consider what we do about that. And I'm mentioning cutting our cloth as being one thing as well. So that's the 106 element of things. On the Sustrans and looking at our greenways, this is something where, while it's not wholly controlled by our services, we are working with those services in major projects about how we look at the funding, how we look at some of the combined authority funding, and looking in the longer term on our prowess and our networks. And we have reached out to Sustrans to continue that conversation, just to see where we can get to with that. They gave us an initial funding offer, which was higher than we could afford, but we still want to continue that conversation. So I just wanted to flag that that's not the end of where we are with it. On the hand tools and machinery, yes, we are looking at EV, we're looking at electric hand tools, we're looking at new innovations such as GPS-linked lining machines, remote controls, things like that. But one of the biggest challenges we face is that we've moved away from seasonality. So before, where there used to be very distinct growing and non-growing seasons, we're seeing grass grow throughout the year. And what this means is our machines need to be able to cut longer grass. So that's one of the primary areas that we are looking at in terms of technology and machinery. I think that should have covered anything, but let me know if it hasn't.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, Councillor Bolt is nodding his head, so he doesn't want to come back. And Graham wants to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Bolt. Just picking up on the insurance element for volunteers and people that may then help and support our services in the future. As you know, Natural Kirklees, there is a payment they make, and we do fund their public liability. And we are now looking at how we can extend the council's public liability for other people, very similar to the winter service element of it. So we won't be putting anybody at risk and leaving them in any unknown position regarding their insurance and the challenges that they may face. I think also, just to say, service level agreements, it is absolutely crucial that when we do decide there's a different model of working, whether it be an hybrid model that you referred to or otherwise, that those service level agreements are communicated and are very clear in what we're going to do in the future. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think he said he had to take a call earlier. So we're going to go to Councillor Tyler.
Thank you, Chair. Son of a gun, stole my questions as well. Guys, if getting them walks out. Yeah. But more of a comment, actually, I think, because, as I say, Martin asked me questions about working with community groups and about the Greenway as well. But on the working with community groups, I mention this whenever there is talk of working with community groups, is that there are areas which are deprived areas that struggle to form community groupings, and that means they won't be able to, or they're going to be less likely to put a group in place to deliver the services or help deliver the services, should I say, that the council has been providing over the years. So it's just, as I say, more of a comment on making sure it's as balanced across the board as we get. Absolutely, we've got to work with community groups, and the public will have a view that the council should be doing the maintenance entirely. I would agree with that view, but desperate times call for desperate measures, and I think asking the public to help us maintain our green spaces is the way we've got to go, isn't it? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So go to Councillor Matthew.
Yeah, just a comment really. In response to what Liz was saying earlier, actually, about the trees being planted in recreational grounds. Having been a child not so long ago, having a woodland in a park is not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's done respectfully and in line with all the other things. And even when the trees are big enough, we could climb them and put rope springs on, stuff that wouldn't get through a risk assessment. So just kind of it has to be done obviously in consultation with the community and respectfully towards the actual park itself. But I would just say that having a woodland in a children's play space is not a bad thing. And secondly, anybody playing Martin Bolt bingo, I think we all got it. Murfield, Parish Councils, Greenways, he got through all of his regular thorns, didn't he? So God bless Martin.
He missed Murfield Station.
Chair, can I just clarify? I was talking about where recreation grounds are proposals where recreation grounds are completely covered in trees, not just some trees. Okay, just to clarify what I was referring to. Thank you.
No worries. So, Councillor Taylor, you're going to be the last comment or question, and then we're going to have to move on from this item because we've overrun.
Yeah, it's a comment and observation really, and it picks up on Councillor Hawkins was talking about working with community groups. I approached a couple of community groups in my patch about the possibility of them maybe taking on some of the grass cutting, even if they were paid for it. There was a reluctance to do it because what you find with community groups, and in my patch they are probably more resilient, they're more available, is invariably they're reliant on a small number of people. And if those people disappear, or they're unwell, or they move away, it falls. So they're not willing to take on a responsibility because they can't, unlike, I know we have challenge with employees, but at least there is a corporate body that has a responsibility. When you start to put that responsibility on a group of 4 or 5 people in a community, it's not really viable. So I got pushback. I was hoping I could get some agreements, but they weren't willing to pursue it for that very reason. And I think it sounds like a really good solution, but I think you probably need to do a bit of reflection on how do we pick that back up if the circumstances change. I mean, we have if we get into procurement or contracts, we talk about break clauses and things like that. Maybe it's thinking along those lines about, yes, if you're willing to take something on, but it might be for a short period of time.
Okay, Graham?
Yeah, I think we currently have 4 full-time equivalent volunteer coordinators on our books. And we also have, again, to repeat myself, Natural Kirklees, Tim, Ed and David in there. They are a real asset and can get the cohesion that you're chatting around for volunteer groups to keep them in a space. But I think the main thing is not to be too demanding. It's to say what you can do, yeah, when you can do it. And of course there'll be volunteer groups that have got a link to a facility or a sporting activity that may be a little bit more sustainable. But you're right, Councillor Taylor, there'll be some areas that are, I'll do it for a few weeks and I'll come back out. So I'm sighted on that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not about support from the, the officers, the likes of Andy and people that work in my patch. It's actually, we want the grass cutting, every 3 weeks, say. So Joe Bloggs is going to cut it every 3 weeks, and then Joe Bloggs isn't available. What happens? Andy's not going to come along and cut it. And then the grass isn't cut, and then the community start getting unhappy. Relying purely on volunteers is a challenge when you have small groups. Now, I accept when you're talking about sport facilities, maybe they have a broader reach, but and certainly in my patch, which is a series of patchwork of small villages, your community groups are a handful of people. You have 1 or 2 of them that are available. We see this with support for libraries in terms of volunteers for libraries. We struggle sometimes with that because you have 1 or 2 people, one's unwell, one's away, and suddenly you're struggling. So you just need to think about it's that element of it, so they won't take a commitment on because they can't guarantee to fulfil it.
Okay. Thank you for your comments and questions there. I think we'll move swiftly on to item 8 because I spent longer than this that item, but it's all good. Thank you, officers, for all the presentation and answering the question. Really appreciate it. So item 8 is Trees Teams Capacity and Policy Review. Can I ask Joe Robertson to give his presentation, please? Thank you.
So hello, I've bringing a presentation about the operational side of the trees team, so the management of the council's own tree stock, a brief overview by way of scene setting of the current tree team, its capacity issues, and then going forward into our ongoing policy review. So in terms of the council's tree stock, there's several sections of legislation that place duties on the council under the Health Safety at Work Act, Occupiers Liability Act and the Highways Act that place those duties on the council to manage our trees to an acceptable level. I think some of the key words in the legislation are the reasonably practicable measures. So that's the core basis of the work for the council's trees team. In terms of our council-owned trees and the tree stock, we don't have every tree plotted. We don't know where all the trees are, but using something called Blue Sky Data, which is aerial software, we've managed to estimate that we have about approximately 190,000 trees on council land at the moment that we are responsible for. Trees provide multiple benefits, and there's a lot of research out there now about the benefits in terms of just general health, mental health, well-being, the biodiversity, in terms of carbon capture, pollution absorption, and the economic uplift as well. There's research now coming out in terms of 20% uplift in house prices where the houses have views of trees, and a 40% increase in retail areas, in footfall in retail areas. So there are a lot of value to those 190 trees that we're currently managing. Now, there's a system called the CAVAT, the Capital Asset Evaluation for Amenity Trees, and it's a calculation system for putting a monetary value on trees and that amenity value that they provide. So using our urban highways trees that we actually have plotted, those urban street trees are currently estimated to have a monetary value of about £51 million in terms of an asset and a value to the area. Funding for the trees team, we don't hold any budgets. There are no budgets. Completely trading account, relying on income generation. We manage other departments, other services, trees for them where they have it vested on their, when land vested with them have trees on them. Now, in terms of staff, in total, we have 15 members of staff that's carrying out that work. The key areas there are the inspectors. We have 4 inspectors carrying out the safety inspections. And then with the arborists, we have 8 arborists who are actually the tree surgeons that carry out the physical work to the trees. So just a very quick overview of those 2 areas. The operational tree team, so the arborists, they carry out the emergency call-out work. We offer a 24/7 call-out cover all year round. They do the safety works, working on dead dangerous trees, carrying out statutory functions for highways, etc., and then operate as an internal contractor for services that want additional tree work undertaking. So in terms of workload, that looks from between April and October, that operational team had on their books just over 10,500 man-hours of work logged. They've done half of that so far. In terms of the storm calls, out of hours work, in that same period, they did approximately 1,000 man-hours of emergency storm call. Now, we'll be going on into the tree policy area later on in the presentation, and the tree inspection teamwork areas are the key ones that plug into that policy area. So at the moment, their 2 main work areas, they carry out repeat inspections. Now, this is a core part of their role in line with the current adopted policy. So they carry out a cycle of safety assessments on our trees, maybe 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on the tree, what's wrong with it, its location, etc. And that's key to our defendability in terms of a landowner if there's an incident. Secondary to that, they carry out ad hoc requests. So these are complaints received by members of the public. Now, these are mainly claims of low-level nuisance, things like leaf fall in gardens, shade to gardens, etc. Now, covering the sort of statistics for their area, the workload fluctuates quite significantly through the year, but they're averaging, the team of 4 are averaging about 840 cases a month. Now, it's important to know that's not 840 trees. We can't separate that data. Those cases could be 1 tree or a group of trees or a woodland. Now, the repeat inspections, the cycle of inspections, we know how many of those we have to do every month that are on the books. So in December, they did 1,154. January, we're expected to do 1,336. February, 968. So I think it's key looking at the average cases that the team does. They will be working at above average levels just to get through those repeat inspections coming forward. We're confident we can do that because the repeat inspections are more efficient than going out to the ad hoc requests that may be spread across the district, but the team is working significantly above average capacity just to get that sort of basic safety work done. In terms of those ad hoc requests, the team's averaging about 80 inspections a month that they're actually dealing with. And these are inspections where they've picked them up, been out, dealt with the customer and closed that down. We can't get to them all. They are triaging them in terms of the safety levels, the danger, and at the moment we have in excess of 300 cases that are backlogged that are just those low-level nuisance that the team can't get to. And we're estimating that would be approximately another 2 additional inspectors just to deal with that work. So in terms of challenges, like grounds maintenance colleagues, we are struggling with attracting and retaining staff. Vacancies, we're currently running at about 28% vacancies in the team, which is causing some impacts. Because of that, we're having to engage with private contractors more to get some of the routine work done. The procurement process for that, it's approximately 3 months from us actually putting the work out to tender to that being awarded, so it's significantly slower than if our team was going out to it. We are seeing a steady rise in these ad hoc requests, these complaints over the last few years, and that appears to be driven by an imbalance of expectations and the actual resource reality on the ground. We also need to start to look at increasing our repeat inspections. So in 2020, the Council adopted a tree policy that set inspection cycles. Having run that for a few years, we have picked up in some gaps in service areas now where we are not carrying out those basic safety inspections. So we need to increase that capacity. We then have ash dieback, which is going to be a significant increase in workload. We are working on that in the background and drafting an action plan which we're intending to bring through separately to scrutiny when we've fully assessed what that means for the district. So in terms of impact, it's impacting our ability to undertake the emergency response and those statutory functions. That's mainly through capacity issues. Operation resilience, leave and sickness is causing sort of impact if somebody's off because the team's significantly smaller. And the team is very passionate about what they do. They want to be out there, they want to be addressing customer complaints, and the current challenges is causing stress on them, and the loss of staff is compounding those issues sort of in terms of morale issues. So just to focus on the tree inspection side of things, because like I say, that's moving into the policy review. So in terms of the risk relating to our tree inspections, the HSE stats give an average of 6 deaths a year from trees or falling branches. Now half of these are on public spaces. When you compare that level of risk to other areas like road traffic accidents, the HSE do put the risk from falling trees and branches as the risk is broadly acceptable. However, there is a duty, the HSE recognises there is a duty that we have to do everything reasonably practical to ensure that people are not exposed to the risk to their health and safety. Now, in our case, in terms of landowner and trees, that's this cycle of inspection, so we can identify hazards as they develop and get work done before they become an issue to the point where there's an incident. I think it's really important to understand that if we fail to carry out those repeat tree inspections, then it will result and that failure then results in tree failure, which causes an incident of death, injury, property damage. We will be subject to legal action, prosecution under the Health and Safety Act, corporate manslaughter, financial penalties, compensation. As an example, the most recent local authority tree case was in 2021. They were found to be at fault, and they were found by the HSE £300,000. That doesn't include any compensation and damage figures. I've not found those figures. And obviously, relating to that, there'll be the associated reputational damage. So to address some of these challenges and address some of these issues, we are going through a policy review at the moment. So in 2020, the Council adopted a brief policy document, a risk framework and a guidance document for the management of its trees. Now that needs updating to bring in line with industry best practice, some of the case law that's come through, but also to bring it in line with some of the capacity issues we have and allow us to use the resources we have more efficiently. So what we've been working on is a restructure of that document to come out with the new policy statements, management standards, risk framework and service standards, which didn't actually exist in the existing document. We're hoping that this document will give the council more control over the service it delivers, be able to manage those expectations and use our resources better while having a more defendable position. So very quickly, going through the draft, the first section again is that scene setting, why it's needed. We're going into policy statements which are updated from the originals. They will act as overreaching sort of policies for a scaffold, a foundation for the rest of the document. We're then going into the updated risk framework to bring it in line with current industry best practices. But one thing we found is the previous commitments were actually, in some areas, the inspections were actually above those that were the minimum required under industry best practice. So we're re-looking at that, how we can use our capacity and use some of these lesser inspection regimes. So less is the wrong word, but as an example, we're moving to vehicle-based inspections for highways, which is industry best practice. It's adopted, it's fully accepted. So it will be 2 inspectors going around highways, and as they see in a vehicle and as they see a potential issue, that's getting logged for a more detailed inspection rather than an inspector wandering around all the highways, which is just not possible with the current capacity. So those are the kind of areas we're looking at with this policy review. We're then looking at management standards. So the policy is setting new, updating on the original management guidance to actually set some standards for how we are going to manage maintenance trees, how we're going to meet those legal duties, the felling, the pruning, crucially as well, how we're going to deal with property damage and subsidence claims. What is the minimum level of expert evidence that's required under sort of normal insurance claims, etc. So we're setting all that information out, and then it goes into those areas where it is inconvenience, where it is nuisance, where we can carry out work, where we can't carry out work. One of the key, this is a new area in terms of the policy review of the service standards. It didn't have any before, so we are setting target timeframes for works to be completed in different scenarios, but also inquiries, target times. We are going to try to meet in terms of responding to public and internal inquiries. And to do that, we are setting a pro forma for both types. We're getting inquiries in from lots of different angles, coming in various different formats and various different levels of information. So the hope is that the pro forma will allow us to have all the information we need to be able to triage that and respond quickly back to the customer. And if we get through to adoption with this, it would then be gone online on our webpage as a pro forma for people to access as well. So as a very quick sort of overview, we are currently focusing on safe and legal, these repeat safety inspections and any ad hoc requests of safety critical nature. That is going on at the moment. We're trying to strengthen this position and messaging around what we can and cannot do. And then we're going to continue with this policy review to refocus and realign our priorities. The expectation is this is an emerging draft. We've come to scrutiny for comment for note. It will go around further consultation, and then once we're ready, we'll be coming back through scrutiny with a view of taking that through to Cabinet for adoption.
Thank you, Joe, for that presentation. I believe we've got already some set of questions and comments, so I'm just going to go to Councillor Matthew first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, anybody that knows me knows that I'm the tree guy. So I've got quite a lot to say. So I'm not going to say it all at once because that wouldn't be fair, and you'd forget half of what I asked you anyway. So I've kind of tried to categorise different things I've got to say. The first round is basically a bit of house maintenance on the document itself. The policy document I was very impressed by. I found it an encouraging read, and I have to say that not only because it's true, but because Councillor Simpson has a go at me when I don't say his documents are pretty. But the cover sheet, the summary sheet, is not adequate. It hasn't been proofread. The £51 million figure it says here is actually 5,100,000. There's a zero missing, and lots of it's missing. You know, the 3.4 climate change and air quality on the tree policy is blank on the document I have here in front of me. Yeah, 3 X's it says. Yeah. So I don't know what's happened there. I assume it's more of a clerical error than anything. On page 30 in our packs, when it talks about the legislation that we have, it makes reference to the European Protected Species legislation. Is that still in force post-Brexit?
We are expecting that to hopefully come through and be changed. So there is a reference in there because this was drafted some time ago.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's an emerging draft, but we're hoping to have similar legislation that will just move through, and we will be changing that word to know what it is.
That's fine, okay. On page 32, when it talks about the aims for the overall document, the aims are good, but I think there's one missing, which is referenced throughout the rest of the document, which is the aim to increase tree numbers and tree cover. It's not actually in that list. I think it would be helpful to have it there as a statement of intent, because it is written throughout the document at large. And then under the service standards, pages 57 and 58 I have here, just a couple of questions. The prioritisation of calls, so emergency and urgent, high priority, medium priority, low priority. I'm just wondering who makes that categorisation and at what point in the process. It doesn't say, and does that add to the response time? And finally, a simple point. I'll come back with questions and ideas later. On the documents, it makes on the documents that members of the public and internal colleagues are asked to fill in to get in touch. It makes reference to this policy document. Will it be linked on the same place at the website and attached so that it's easy for those people to find? That's my first round, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matthew. George, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thank you for the comments. We have certainly some of those we will pick up on. Like I say, it's an emerging draft. It has been around some colleagues already. In terms of pro forma, yes, that is the intention. That is going to be a online-based pro forma that will have links to the documents. We are trying to make it as easily and accessible, all this information for customers to be able to self-help as well, so they know what we can do. So that is the intention.
Thank you, Joe. Follow up? Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Taylor, and then...
I'm feeling rather inadequate, really, when commenting after the tree guy, and before a tree guy, no doubt. Just a couple of comments, and just picking up on that pro forma as well. If we're in the process of developing that and making it fit for service, it may be worth, if we're not already talking to council inquiries, because I suspect us lot will send half of these things through council inquiries. So it may be just putting that link in place to make sure that they know what they need to get from us, because I'm sure we'll end up using them in terms of that. Just on the instance of so falling trees and people that have been injured or sadly died, and it sounds like a really small number, which is a great positive. But I also suspect some of that will be in relation to weather incidents, and perhaps that's worth reflecting on about. Because I know whenever there is a storm, your guys are just bombed out, aren't they? But it's fine to say, well, we need to try and prevent these incidents from happening, but some of them are probably impossible to predict in that sense. Even if you'd done a tree inspection a week before, probably it wouldn't have altered the fact that that tree was hit by a sudden gust at whatever and brought the tree down. So I think what I'm really saying is perhaps you guys shouldn't beat yourselves up too much about it, because probably most of the incidents aren't ones you could have foreseen and therefore prevented. But having the right inspection regime in place is really important. And then my only other comment, and then I'll pass back to the expert, is on parks and public open spaces, you talk about removing dead wood. Now, I've always felt that in wooded areas, I mean, obviously, if it's across a footpath, you want to remove it, but we would want to retain them in place because they degrade and they're great for biodiversity and, it's food for insects and things like that. So the concept of removing dead wood, was that in the context of it's a branch that's dead and needs pruning or removal or whatever? I'll let the tree guy explain the terminology, but I don't want to see us taking all of the dead wood out of our wooded areas, because I think it's part of that biodiversity and does help with the insect support. So just the way it was worded in here, and I'm a layman, I don't understand, but if I was a member of the public and I was reading that, I might think that I should be telling you that there's the remains of a tree here that you need to come and remove. So it might want some conditioning around that, perhaps. And I was going to make the comment about the covering report being incomplete as well, but got there first. But thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. George, you want to come back to that?
So in terms of dead wood, working backwards, I'll look at the wording on that. We are not there to remove all the dead wood. We're in exactly the same boat. We want to sort of work with the biodiversity and look at leaving standing dead wood. It's something we have long discussions with in terms of tree inspectors, because it is down to removing it where we know it is a hazard or where it's of a size that is a hazard. Specifically standing dead wood in woodlands, there's a big debate in the industry at the moment. A dead tree, removing it down to a standing stem, so we're retaining its wildlife value, but at which point does that become a hazard if it's by a footpath, etc. So we are very aware of that, and if that's come across wrong in the policy, we will try and reword that. Some of this is just being dragged over from the old policy where it's been acceptable, so but happy to look at rewording some of that so it makes a little bit more sense. In terms of the risk and the storm damage, yes, the team's very aware of that. I think the problem is a lot of the deaths on the public spaces, the HSE have found that although it's storm damage, it has been storm damage but has been exacerbated by defects, and the team that's their focal point at the minute. It's picking up where there's defects we know weakens that tree. There are plenty of cases out there where the National Trust recently have had a case that was an accident. It was put down as an act of God because they had done everything they reasonably could, and a storm had unfortunately caused some damage to a tree. So we're trying to move ourselves with this policy into that position where we have a defendable position and we have as safe, as reasonably practical as we can for our community, but we can't cover everything, and the team do know that.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. So now we're in Councillor Tyler, and then...
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation as well. Questions back to what was... Actually, I think it was Matthew's question on the previous item as well regarding the recruitment. I mean, 30%, nearly 30% vacancies is eye-watering, really. And with the recruitment freeze that's in place, how is that affecting the department as well? You talk about the outsourcing and procurement, and this is more, I suppose, a technical point, really, a little bit, probably ignorance on myself. How does that actually outsourcing work when it comes to trees? Is it case by case? Do you work with tree surgeons locally to have sort of a contract with them? I'm just curious with that 3 months, is it a case of you identify where work is needed and then it takes 3 months to go through procurement until it gets somebody out there, or do you have sort of a rolling contract with certain tree surgeons that you can work with in the future? Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Graham?
Yeah, thank you. I guess the recruitment is exactly as per the grounds maintenance. So no freeze. Every case will be considered, particularly in Joe's area when it's an health and safety led role. Joe's been without an ARBOR manager for some time now, and those type of roles are considered and are released and will be recruited to. So we're in the same space across all the service areas. Okay, I'll let you go on to the other.
Just to add to the recruitment there, we have, in terms of the ARB, the operational ARBs, we have had these recruitment issues before this sort of freeze came in. It's difficult attracting the skill level of staff, they just don't seem to there, but we have got more success recently. We've just appointed one, with 2 more interviews to do, but it is difficult at the moment. I don't know what that's causing that. We've never had a problem before, but this last 12 months, attracting those skilled staff seems to be an issue. In terms of the outsourcing, the contracting, at the moment it's been done in batches. So the inspectors who are going out and writing the job sheets for these, if they're picking up work, they are allocating those to either this routine work that can go out to contract, or if it's more reactive and we need to get there quickly, it's our team. We are then looking at that normal work, that normal routine work, and putting together batches, which then go through our procurement colleagues, goes out through the tender process, and local companies are tendering for those big batches of work. We were hoping that would be more temporary, so we haven't looked at other ways, but it is looking, given the recruitment issues ongoing, it's looking like we'll be using that again, contractors again, for the next 12 months. So the plan is to sort of talk to procurement colleagues about how we can engage with specific contractors to tender for contractors and speed this up rather than having to go out for batches all the time.
And obviously across the region we have a variety of different frameworks. We have your civils and a number of contracts that other local authorities have already commissioned. And what we do straight away is we look at the horizon scanning, look at the type of work that Joe wants, and if we need to extend the offer and get more contractors in, the first thing is to say, what are the other local authorities doing, and can we jump onto your tender? And that seems to speed the process up significantly. So that's a piece of work that we'd look to do. Okay.
Mike, I just ask a follow-up real quick as well on that? Yeah. Thank you for this. I suppose my question that I guess has more to do on the engagement with the public side of things, because you mentioned, and I hope Matthew the tree guy doesn't beat me up for this one, but you mentioned that trees are good for mental health, and I think I would rephrase that a little bit and say the right trees are good for mental health, because what have a number of cases in my ward where very, very large trees are literally hanging over houses, and they're worried that it's going to fall in on their house one day and it's going to have disastrous consequences. Now, whether that is an accurate representation of the strength of the tree itself and whether that is likely to happen is sort of a different point, really. In residents' minds, they see that as something that is constantly hanging over them. Is there a way we can sort of improve engagement and communication with those residents to sort of make sure that they know that the council is aware of it and is monitoring it, and there is more of a steady stream, just to reassure people more than anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Something we're working on. We're focusing on getting the policy in place at the moment and getting that up on the website. Our website, in terms of the forestry team, isn't the best at the moment. I've taken over this team 12 months ago, and it's something we are working on, because ideally when the policy's ready and we can go live with it, we will support that with frequently asked questions, but information about trees that not everybody may understand. So just because it is a large tree doesn't mean it's dangerous, that we are inspecting them, all those kind of things, and try and get that user-friendly information out there.
Just going to bring in Councillor Smage online.
Okay, thanks. I just got a really quick question about trees blocking natural light. You say where trees are growing naturally, there's no legal right to light. I just wondered if you could explain that a little bit, because sometimes trees are growing on council land that are close to properties, and property owners may have to have their lights on in certain rooms because of the tree blocking light. Whereas the tree could just be cut back a little bit, not felled or anything, just pruned a little bit to make sure that people don't have to spend money on electricity for the lights. So where there's no legal right to light, how does that fit with planning as well? Because you can object, can't you, about a building blocking light. What's the difference with trees to the planning objections, please? And is it not just, I understand that the focus has to be on inspecting trees to make sure they're not dangerous and things like that. But is it about being a good neighbour, the council being a good neighbour? Because not everybody will be able to go through the courts. Thanks.
Joe, do you want to take that?
So in terms of legal right to light, because trees are a natural entity that grow incrementally, the Right to Light Act, the legislation around them, doesn't include them. If you were to build a wall or a building that has an instant block of light to somebody, whereas a tree's at yearly incremental. So there isn't any legal right to light in terms of trees at all. Hopefully the policy reflects that there is the option and the discretion for us to be able to come in and do, where it is a case of removing one branch to alleviate a problem, we can look at that, and it will be down to where funding is available. Because as I've said, we are a trading account, so we can recommend the work, but the service that owns that tree may not actually have the money to pay for it. We are focusing on the safety side of things, but we are trying to include in the policy the opportunity to be able to work where we can to alleviate issues. It's just not a blanket no to everything. But in terms of the right to light, comments are more about the felling of trees, because we do find residents, one of the common problems is residents are moving into properties and then finding there's an issue with the right to light, whereas legally, certainly from a planning point of view, my history in the planning side of things, the law and the right to light sees that as a material consideration before you move into the property. You should be thinking, is there a large tree there? So that's one of the balances we have to make. We want to try and keep the trees, we want to try and keep that benefit, but if there are reasonable measures we can take in terms of pruning to try and alleviate those issues and the funding is available, then that should be done. And those are the kind of jobs we are putting out to contract at the moment rather than our own team.
Okay, thanks. Could you just have a look at that wording then at 8.3? Because now I better understand what you're meaning. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Councillor Smage. Councillor Matthew?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll just run through a number of questions I have, if that's okay. Under the tree risk framework, so this is page 38 of the 4 zones, seems very sensible. I very well thought out. Just a few questions about zone 4. Does this mean that, I hope it doesn't, it's included in zone 4, which is no routine inspections, all young trees generally below 5 metres in height and planted in the last 10 years. I hope that doesn't include our newly created woodlands, because maintenance is important to encourage survival rates among saplings. I mean, the group I'm involved with, we go back and plant sites we did a year or two ago to prune the sides, and then it's keeping an eye on them to know when's the right time to take the guards off and make sure they're not being competed against by other species and overgrown, which can happen while they're still small. Grass can block all the light from a sapling that's still in its tube, only a couple of years old, and kill it, in which case there was no point us planting it in the first place. So I hope it doesn't include our newly planted woodlands. And also, trees in sites with very limited access, perfectly understood. You know, a tree that's in the middle of a forest that's not near a footpath or a road doesn't need to be inspected very often. But never inspected makes me worry that potentially there could be outbreaks of disease in the hearts of our woodlands that just doesn't get noticed until it's a much bigger problem. I understand we might not have the resources to check on any real regular basis, but I think that would be a concern, that if we could potentially lose a lot of trees, because like you say, ash dieback was a devastating example. On the theme of that, does the legislation that we're abiding to, a BC something, I can't remember the numbers, protect us adequately against imported trees that could bring disease? I know that our wisps are going to be sourced from UK seed source, but it doesn't say the same thing about the standards, the more mature trees. It doesn't say where they come from. So I hope we're not, or if we are importing them, which we shouldn't really need to, they are checked for signs of disease that could be brought in, because that's where ash dieback came from and Dutch elm disease a long time ago, famously. On the similar point, just wanting some reassurance about the diversity of the trees that we're going to be planting and putting in. I've said it in a few previous meetings, but some councils in other parts of the country just planted rows and rows of identical monocultures, which was stupid. And I hope that there is hints in the document that that's not what we're planting, but it would be good to have some reassurance that we are going to have a diversity of native species and looking to it a woodland, not just lots of trees, because there is a difference. What else do I have? Yeah, the aftercare on the wisps, it's not mentioned on pages 50 and 51. And that does worry me a bit, that it's not mentioned in the policy document how we're going to maintain our woodlands going forward and make sure they survive. What else do I have? Yeah, just in terms of guard, you reference, you use biodegradable guards and products wherever possible, which is brilliant. And if you could tell me where you're getting them from, I'd quite appreciate that, because we struggle in the Tree Society to get non-plastic guards, but we do have techniques for recycling plastic guards. So how successfully are you managing to avoid plastic, basically? And if you need some tips, I'm sure I can give you some. I've got some ideas I'd like to contribute later, but that's enough for now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Matthew. Joe, do you want to come back to those questions, comments?
Yep.
You don't have to answer everyone.
No, I know, but I've read notes. So in terms of Zone 4 and the young trees, that is a risk framework that has safety inspections. So yes, we will be inspecting for maintenance, they'll still be getting those visits, but this is just for that defendable risk framework in terms of risk. A lot of the HC documents and a lot of the national documents do recognise that trees of that size aren't really a risk, even if it was to die. So that's where that's from, and it's to try and make sure we don't overcommit our resources, saying we're going to look at absolutely everything. Again, in terms of the non-inspections, we've had a little bit debate whether we should include that at all, because our land is public land. So the vast majority, in fact, we don't have any areas at the moment that are on non-inspection because it's all publicly accessed to a different level. But we felt the need to include that just on the off chance that ever comes up. And again, if we're ever challenged, that is in there as a defendable position. But it's certainly something we can look at. In terms of the plastic guards, we have not avoided plastic. We are using, at the moment, we are using a biodegradable plastic guard because that was available. Last season, we missed the boat and we couldn't get any. This season, we managed to get some of those in stock early on. We jumped on it as soon as there was stock available. We are hoping to move towards something called Next Gen, which are wool and resin based, but the manufacturing process just isn't up there at the moment to be able to have the stock available. We have our name on the next time there is some. So one of the companies we're using at the moment who won the tender this time is Green Tech in Harrogate, and they stock all those kind of areas. But last season we've used plastic guards because they were all available, and we will be looking at removing those and going through the recycle process afterwards, because it does seem pointless. A lot of this woodland creation, one of the main objectives is climate change, and we're filling fields full of plastic. So, and the biodegradable plastic, again, it's not ideal, but it's the next best step we have. And if some of those get lost, as they do inevitably, we find people use them as dog toys and it gets lost in a river somewhere, we know that's not a problem. But we are still intending to go and remove those, so we're not filling the fields with lots of biodegradable plastic as well. Has that covered the questions? I think I've got them all. Yes, a lot of that's covered by the national biosecurity stuff anyway. I think there's a good point there actually in terms of standards. We can include the same wording for whips, they're coming from the same place. We would not want to be importing any material at all. It's counterproductive as well, because if it's grown in this country, genetically it's used to being in this country and used to our climate. So we're trying to use local producers, and we've currently got a partnership arrangement with Leeds City Council in terms of the whips, the young stocks. So that is as close as we can get in terms of local procurement. But again, I can quite easily will add some wording into that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, thanks for that. The plastic guard, perfectly understandable. The technology isn't there yet. Hopefully it will be, but you can reuse good condition plastic guards from sites though. As long as you cut between the holes for the cable ties, you can use the cable tie to keep it together, and you could get potentially 20, 30 years of use out of one, which might only be 2 or 3 sites, because sometimes it's 10 years before you can take it off. But that's better than it using single use and then gets recycled or incinerated or whatever the case may be. Just a couple of ideas then that sort of came to me. One, potentially in addition to the policy list on page 35, as consideration being given to a 1 out, 1 in or 2, 3, 4 in policy of when we are forced to fell a tree or remove a tree for whatever sensible reason, whether that be woodland maintenance or disease or age, do we automatically replace it? Could that be a policy that we could adopt? 1 sapling doesn't replace a mature tree, but 2 or 3 or 4 might help, you know. And the other one was, I wondered if there was capacity for a bit of joined up thinking with the waste strategy. Because in a few years' time, Kirklees might well be generating quite a lot of its own compost as we roll out food waste composting. And is there capacity for potentially Kirklees creating its own tree nursery? Not only to provide ourselves with trees, but if it's successful enough and viable economically, it might just be more economical to sell the compost to middle-class gardeners, frankly. But if we created enough trees, we could supply our own capacity, which would be a reduced cost to us, and maybe even sell some to other local authorities or organisations. So that's a long-term potential ambition, but I wondered if it could be considered.
Sure.
So in terms of tree nursery, that's something we've spent a lot of time on before we started working with Leeds. Commercially, it would be difficult at the moment in terms of the capital cost to set up and the amount of time needed to grow on your first produce. Nationally, there's a shortage at the moment of new trees, but that is more down to all the producers have not scaled up in terms of the government commitments at the moment. They are working on that. So by the time we've got our commercial nursery up and running, everyone else will be up to capacity. And I think there's quite a lot of financial commercial risk for Kirklees in that. So at the moment, we are working with partners in Leeds who are already up to capacity to sort of try and source that. In terms of the waste strategy and food composting, certainly an interesting idea we can continue to work on. We have just worked with a national company called Jenkinson's who provide biomass to power stations, and a lot of the timber we produce from the arboricultural waste isn't timber grade, it isn't sawmill quality. So we've actually just worked with them to get a lot of that out to biomass rather than it just going to waste. And we are looking at alternatives of how we can use our waste better going forward in terms of wood waste. So that there may be some sort of scope to work there and an idea we can take forward. In terms of policy, the 1 in, 1 out, 3 in, 3 out, or 1 in, 3 out, it's really difficult to set specific numbers because each case is very, very different. Each felling is very different. And it's something we have debated quite a lot going forward. Where we're removing a tree, as an example, because of a significant subsidence claim, and it's been proved there are the soil conditions that cause vegetation influence subsidence. We can't put a tree back there, and we are looking where we put other trees back, but committing to numbers can often be quite difficult, and committing to it in a policy, because it may actually be better we're taking 1 tree out, but the suitable location to plant it may be better to put 1 specimen tree like an oak tree in, rather than trying to squeeze 3 in. We are working with planning colleagues, because The Environment Act has brought out a commitment for developers to start planting street trees on all new developments. And it's so this is where this debate's been going on, how many trees do we ask for? So rather than looking for 1 tree removed, 3 trees back, we're trying to set a canopy cover increase for development areas. And that's maybe something we can look at in terms of going forward, a reiteration of this, a review of this policy further on, incorporate that kind of thing in for where we're removing 1 large oak tree that has a canopy coverage of X amount, we are going to replace it with the similar amount canopy cover, whether that be 2 small trees because it's more appropriate in the location, or another oak tree. So that's the route we're going down, but there's a lot more work to do yet on that.
Thank you, Joe. Yep. He's answered your question already. That's very good. I believe that Councillor Taylor, and then I'll make the last comments and questions, and then we'll wrap that agenda item up.
Thank you. It's just following on from the discussion about the diversity of the trees that we plant, and a plea for some nuts, because I think so just in terms of the types of trees that we plant, so it's providing different sources of food. So I'm making a plea for the squirrels, really. But a more genuine point about that, you know, that variety. So we're not just planting native trees that perhaps don't fruit, or we're planting. There's a lot of planting of fruit trees going on in community groups and things, but nuts are something that is tending to be neglected, and actually it's something that would add to that diversity. So yes, I'm making a plea for the squirrels, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yes, sure, Graham. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just conscious of time. I'd like to thank, you know, the committee for the comments. It is a draft policy that we're trying to develop here now, and I'm sure you've given us lots of food for thought there. I just need to remind ourselves that at the moment, with the resource that we've got and the funding that we've got, this is safety critical. Yeah, some really good ideas coming out of this discussion. We'll take them away, but the fact is safety critical at this particular time. And remember, the amount of cover is going to grow in the future, and that will put further pressure on the inspection regime to make sure that people are safe across our district. Ash dieback, we've not had the discussion. We will be coming back to yourselves about ash dieback, which will require a funding stream, will require more resources. And if I reflect on some of the local authorities, they're on that journey, and they've had to put a dedicated team in, identify dedicated resources, and to start to work to undertake the inspections, and where necessary, remove those type of trees that have got disease. And I'm really keen and really thankful of your comment about trees, you know, make sure we don't bring any other diseases into the district, or indeed wider. So I think it's just that reminder of safety critical at the moment, and I thank really for me to thank Joe as well, because I know the pressures the team are under at this stage. And we will be back to present the final copy of the policy in the next few months, so that you can have a look at the final bit. But many thanks. That's what I just wanted to say on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I'm just going to make a quick comment whilst listening to my colleagues. Quick one, Matthew, quick.
It is very quick. It's not really about it. But am I just right in remembering that it was the forestry team that ended up lighting the beacon on Castle Hill for the Jubilee? Yes, thank you. Well done.
Just a quick, more clarity really. You mentioned that triage system, which I'm really interested in, because that's safety critical, isn't it? I'm assuming that triage form that you have, that you fill in, that is followed by some sort of key. So for example, if you read a particular form that comes into you, you'll be able to kind of box it off into particular action. So one needs to be done immediately or within 4 hours, one within 8 hours or whatever. So I'm assuming there's a key to the triage system.
Yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right, and it comes back to the point that we want to make sure the policy has standards in this time, and that will pick up on not only the standards, but the way that we triage, and that actually that we meet our safety critical requirements. So you're right, yeah.
So as part of the policy review, we have been talking to colleagues in places like Kirklees Direct, who are very keen to have this sort of pro forma through for their staff as well. So there's no key particularly set yet, but it is being worked on in the background. On the form, there are some tick boxes for people to declare, but I think part of the decision has been, like you say, where there are key words, if they are making the word dangerous, whether it's dangerous because leaves are falling in the garden, that's still going through as a priority. And we need to get that right so that it can be used by councillor inquiries, can be used by Kirklees Direct. So that will be separate in the background to how to use this, but we are working on that.
Thank you, Marie-Kay, Joe, Graham. It was a pleasure. Thank you for your presentations and for your team's all hard work. Thank you. Just give a couple of minutes if anybody wants to get drinks and we'll get the team to move forward. Okay, so we're back again. Just a quick short break. So we move swiftly on to item 9, which is the overview of post-16 skills. Councillor Taylor, would you like to make a few comments on Councillor Turner, sorry. I got you confused then. It's just your line of sight, that's why. Sorry, Councillor Turner, would you like to make a few comments before the officers?
Well, if you like, yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's up to yourself. Which? Yeah.
Difficult to sum up in a few words because there's an awful lot in here. I think what is important is the policy of trying to get people back into work, the Aspire, Achieve and Include Kirklees strategy is really important. And then the other thing we've got to bear in mind that this will not bear fruit overnight. Getting people trained does take a number of years. We know we have a massive skill shortage in Kirklees and we know our employment record is not great. We also know that some of our mean incomes are low compared to other parts of the country and certainly in other parts of West Yorkshire, for instance. So we need to drive those skills up. Not only will it benefit the people involved, because obviously a better paid job, more skills, leads to better life outcomes, and that's really, really important for our residents. Tends to lead to better health outcomes, longer longevity in life, etc. So it's really important for them as well as the local economy. If we can drive the mean wage up, that benefits local businesses, all the knock-on effects from that. So it's really important is policy of upscaling Kirklees. But as I say, it won't bear fruit overnight. It is a long-term policy, but hopefully we will see the fruits of this policy in the next few years. I think we need to continue to do all we can to persuade, cajole, if you like, people that apprenticeships are a really good thing. I think there's been, for the last, I don't know, probably 10, 15, probably 20 years, there's been a bit of a stigma around apprentices, and I said this from someone who did an apprenticeship. I did 5 years from leaving school. I think it's one of the best things I've ever done. It taught me a lot to give me a skill for life, although, like with most skills, you need to upskill, and obviously not being involved in the industry, some of those skills will not be relevant anymore. But if you know, we do need plumbers, we need electricians, we need brickies, we need people to mend cars, all those sort of things, traditional apprenticeships, we really need those going forward. So I'd say I think we somehow need to get rid of that stigma that's somehow crept in about apprenticeships. They are really, really important. And a modern apprenticeship, when you look at some of the technology you're dealing with, if you're going into apprenticeship, say, for in a garage, and you're going to be dealing with some of the most advanced technology there is now. It's not the days of the old combustion engine, which was, in its old days, was relatively easy. Now we're talking about very high-tech electrical vehicles, very dangerous to a point unless you know what you're doing as well, because they carry a large voltage, and all the electronics that go with that. So, these are really, really skilled jobs. And we really need to encourage people to get into that. And again, with heating and plumbing, the days of an old gas boiler are long gone. We're now moving to ground source heat pumps. So it's upskilling people to adapt to the changing world we now find ourselves in due to, issues around climate change, etc. We have to change the way we live our lives. So we have to upskill our people to be able to enable us to do that. There's no good putting a ground source heat pump in if you haven't got anybody to fix it. It doesn't do anything for the economy or the climate, does it? So we need to constantly upskill our people, and that's part of this programme, is to constantly upskill our people, working with people like Wicker, etc., to get those skills into the modern workplace. I'm sure Gillian will do a better job than I will.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Gillian, do you want to just do quick introductions and then present your report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Gillian Wallace. I'm Head of Employment and Skills at Kirklees Council. First of all, I just want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to come to the panel today. We're going to give you a bit of an overview of some of the work that's taking place in the field of employment and skills. Just to acknowledge that the brief that we had was quite broad, and employment and skills is growing both in scope and in terms of importance. So as we're on a clock today, what I seek to do with both the report and this presentation is give you a very top-line overview, covering some of what we're doing, and then we can come back at a later date to address anything that you want more of a deep dive in. I also wanted to acknowledge that this report focused heavily on the adult provision, so the post-16 provision, and it is quieter on provision that's working within schools and with school-age children. Many of the challenges that we see now are not recent, and it's been accumulation of a lack of investment and a lack of activity in the past. And effectively, to challenge this, there's almost two strands of work. One about the future workforce that is working with our school-age children and our people in education. But given the fact that in 2023, 80% of the workforce are in work now, we can't ignore the need to upskill and reskill adults as well. So we've got to look at both strands of work if we're going to address the short and medium term as well. The Wales don't exist in isolation. I'm happy to take questions on the young people strands of activity and take them away if I don't have the answers with me today, but really the focus of this report is on the adult activity. Oops, sorry, slide's not moving on. Okay, so first of all, I just want to highlight the challenges, because we talk a lot about the skills gap, but what does it actually mean? The key statistics are both in the report, and there's some of the high-level issues on the screen for you, so I won't go through them all. And alongside the statistics, we know that our economy is changing rapidly, and this is going to present challenges, but it also presents opportunities for Kirklees as well. And we need to make sure that our people have the right skills to get a job, but also progress in work, but also that employers have people with the right skills so that they can grow. Our employers are grappling with skills shortages and inability to recruit, which we've already heard today, and our residents are facing challenges around exclusion and the cost of living crisis. So what we need to look at is what our solutions are towards this. The solutions basically lie in a sustained and significant investment in skills at all levels and all ages. But as the local authority, we recognise that we can't do this alone and we can't operate in isolation. And we've got to create the conditions for local growth, and it's going to involve collaboration across the public, private sectors and also the third sector. Skills is a complex landscape. There is national, regional and local policy, responsibility and also funding streams. The Kirklees Employment and Skills Plan was developed in response to these challenges and also about trying to make sense about what Kirklees wants to prioritise and what we want to achieve, as well as recognising it's not something that we can do alone. We needed to define what the Kirklees ask was, what our position was going to be, and how we wanted to maximise on the opportunities that have become available to us to address our challenges. And the plan was a document that we can put our collective weight behind to ensure that we're all working together to address the key issues and not in silos. Just very briefly on this slide is just a timeline. We originally started to develop the plan in 2020. However, it was not the right time to develop an employment and skills plan. There was far too much that was going on in the world at that time, so we did press pause. There was also a significant amount of change in our stakeholders in that time, and as I've already alluded to, partnership was key with this. We needed to ensure that our stakeholders came along with us on this journey and that we weren't in conflict. So in the past year, we have revisited the work around employment and skills, we have developed the plan, and whereas we're now in the early days of delivery, we've had 2 meetings and we're just beginning to set up task and finish groups, we have started. I'm not going to go through the plan in a great amount of detail today. It's in your packs and you'll have seen copies of it. Really, I'm just going to seek to give you an overview. I did want to acknowledge that the plan doesn't exist in isolation. It's really about setting the scene for Kirklees and ensuring that we can maximise from all the other opportunities. We have a Kirklees economic strategy. We also have an education strategy in the form of Kirklees Futures, and this plan is about joining those 2 key documents together to achieve some action in this space. I also mentioned in the report the role of the West Yorkshire Skills Advisory Panels and the emerging local skills improvement plans, which are a business-led policy documentation which will be produced that will help us link business needs up with education. This plan helps us do that and helps ensure that the Kirklees voice is going to be key in that local skills improvement plan. The plan was developed not in isolation. We looked at the data that was available to us. We had significant employer input, and the stakeholders that are now helping us with the delivery of it also had a significant input into helping us identify the priorities. And the 4 priority areas are on the screen there. We are empowering our young people, digital inclusion, supporting our communities to learn and progress, and skills for the future. Underneath each of those areas, we have a number of actions, which again, I'm not going to list today. They are in the report for you, but where we do have a large number of action plans that are underneath that we are looking to address. And the measures of the plans. How will we know whether the work that we're doing at the moment is having an impact? We once again go back to the intelligence that tells us where are we performing as Kirklees on the national measures, and this is what we will continually look at. We will be wanting to ensure that we minimise the gap between both what we're doing in Kirklees and the national picture. So who's involved in the Employment and Skills Partnership? It is about business organisations and employers. We've got further education colleges involved, universities, national organisations such as DWP and the local authority. And that brings me on to what are we actually doing. In the pack, we've included an overview of some of the employment and skills programmes, primarily the ones where we're able to have either a direct influence on or we're actually delivering ourselves. I've broadly grouped those into programmes for individuals, but also programmes for businesses. One of the things that's becoming very apparent to us is that as we are supporting people into work, and particularly adults, we are very reliant upon employers to come with this journey of upskilling current people that are employed by them. As adults, if they're in work, they've got complicated lives, we need the employers to work with us and support it. There is still gaps in that area, and we are looking at a pipeline of programmes that will help businesses do that and will help all employers of all size develop their employees whilst in work. And finally, I just want to touch on apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are key to us. They're a unique project in the fact that they support not only individuals, but can also help businesses in addressing their needs. And we have a number of programmes that are working on apprenticeships. The statistics around apprenticeships in Kirklees are not great at the moment. The reforms came in 2019, and we've never quite recovered in terms of number of apprentices or number of businesses that are employing apprentices. And it's very hard to say, is that a direct result of the reforms, or is that directly linked through the pandemic and the fact that we are still recovering from what that looks like? We are seeing an improvement in apprenticeships, but we're not where we would like to be. But we are very committed to ensuring that these strands of work continue, because they are a unique product in that place and something that we should support. And I'll leave it there, really. Just race through that presentation a little bit, but happy to open it up.
Thank you, Gillian, for that. Apologies for the interruption. There was some drilling going on. Hopefully, that will not continue. Thank you, Matthew, for that. So we'll go to Councillor Matthew first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and thank you for the presentation, and well done for only cracking a smile and not bursting out laughing. That was discipline. I've only really got one point, because I know that Tyler's the expert on this one, but in the local context, it lists what we do have, which is 4 brilliant institutions for education: Huddersfield University, Greenhead College, Huddersfield New College, and Kirklees College. Shout out to Greenhead, that's where I went. In fact, Councillor Simpson, Councillor McCarthy and I were all in the same year at Greenhead, so they must have put something in the water that year. But something... Careful, John. But something you notice when reading that list is that those are all in and around Huddersfield, and there's no mention of any institution in North Kirklees. Which does seem to be an imbalance we have in our districts. And I was just wondering what plans you had to improve or expand provision in North Kirklees, which is, after all, half of our population.
Gillian, do you want to come back to that?
Yeah, I just want to highlight that Kirklees College now does have a presence in North Kirklees. We've got the higher education centre right in the centre of Dewsbury itself, and that is building both in the scope of provision that it's offering for post-16 and in its range of courses that will be delivered out in that campus.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, well, and that's brilliant for the students that want to do the kind of provision that's provided by Kirklees, but there's the Greenhead's academic excellence and New College's BTEC focus as well. To the kind of you want the diversity of provision for everybody to have every opportunity, not for people that are in one area to only really have provision in one specific path.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more. And I think one thing that's also worth highlighting in the adult landscape is the range of independent training providers. And it's not just further education establishments that help us deliver on these ambitions. We have got a lot of independent providers that work remotely. So they might not have big premises, they might not have big estates. They're actually out in the communities utilising some of the voluntary and sector provision that we've got there to deliver direct to the communities. But it is something we can improve on. We do need to ensure that a breadth of provision and that everybody in Kirklees has the same access to the training of people who live in Huddersfield.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just firstly, an observation on the last comment. We've also got the likes of Hackman White Grammar School in North Kirklees as well, haven't we? And I'm sure there's other provision as well, which we don't have the same in South Kirklees in terms of that post-16. So when you're talking about Greenhead College, sort of what you've got in North Kirklees is they tend to stay in the grammar schools, don't they? So that I think there is probably more there than you think, because we think of it as just, quite a lot of comments and mixture. But firstly, thank you very much for the presentation. Also, thank you very much. You talked about the Kirklees Ask and the Kirklees Voice. And there are things that I feel across the council we don't talk enough. Everyone knows this. We don't talk enough about being really, really clear about what it is we as Kirklees want in whatever realm it may be. So yeah, I loved hearing that. That was playing to my ears. My comment's going to be a bit all over the place because that tends to be the way that I am. One thing I think when we talk about stakeholders and the people that we're working with, and one group that perhaps we ought to reflect on is our local MPs. Because of the access they have, the support they have for levelling up funds, the access they have into ministers, etc. And again, coming back to the Kirklees ask or the Kirklees voice, making sure that they're well briefed on what you're looking for or what you need or what you're asking for, they may be able to help. And we've got a nice balance at the moment, we've got 2 of each. So whoever's in power at the minute, you've got, you know, some that are in the government and some that aren't. So, you know, we've got both angles covered in that respect. So I just think that's valuable. It's worth thinking about how we involve them and brief them. And I know that, you know, so I work with the Dewsbury MP. I know that he's involved with some of the stuff that's happening with Pioneer House that we were talking about, etc. So it's probably worth picking up. I do agree also that pre-16 education is critical in a lot of this, because what we're doing post-16 in reality is picking up what the problems or the flaws are from the pre-16 education. And perhaps a thought for Chair, maybe at some point it might be worth, because pre-16 sits under the Children's Scrutiny Panel, maybe worth having a joint panel discussion to look at the landscape, because I think that would probably be better for you as well in terms of explaining that. It's just the way we're structured that makes that a little more difficult. I did think there were some positives as well that perhaps haven't been emphasised enough. When I just looked at the graphs, and when you look at the graphs, although they're not all brilliant, actually in some of them our performance is better than when you look across West Yorkshire or you look across the UK. And I think we'll perhaps celebrate that a little bit more. So when I look at adults with no qualifications, in Kirklees it's falling faster than the national average or the West Yorkshire average. When you look at the number with NVQ level 4+, it's increasing more steeply than the national average. Yeah, it's not there yet, but you know, it's positive trend. And particularly around gross weekly pay, it almost looks like the figure's wrong, because it's almost like a straight line up for the last couple of years. So something's happened. I don't know what it is, but something significant is happening there. I would also say that, and my colleagues may not agree with me, on gross weekly pay, we need to not beat ourselves up quite so much about it, because whilst we may be below the national average, the cost of living in West Yorkshire is probably lower than it is in some parts of the country, where actually they may be getting in their pay packet more money, but if they're paying more for commuting costs, if they're paying more for housing costs, etc., their actual disposable income, their standard of living, probably isn't necessarily greater. So it's a statistic, it's useful, but it needs to be looked at in perhaps a little bit more in the round. Where I was a little less positive, I'm afraid, when we get to page 99, which is the measures, which we did have up on screen, I don't disagree with the measures. My problem is they're not really measures, because they talk about reducing or increasing, but it doesn't say reducing by what or increasing by what. So how you're supposed to, in any way, judge your performance. You know, reduction in the proportion of working adult ages with no formal qualification. Well, if it reduced by one person, is that a success? You know, you've got to put some quantifiable measures around this stuff. I think your intent is good, but that to me is not a series of measures. It's a series of aspirations at best. If they're going to be measures, you're going to say, well, we intend to do this by this date, and here's my plan of how I'm going to achieve that, and here's my steps along the way, which I can then check to see if I'm on target or whether I need to take other actions, whether I'm overachieving, underachieving. Do I need to focus more on this particular measure rather than this measure, because this one doesn't seem as though it's going to hit what I aim to do in the next, whether it's 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, whatever timescale we put together. But as it stands, there's none of that there. So for me, that is not anything that is a plan that could be in any way measured, or that we could pat ourselves on the back and say we've been successful, or we can identify areas where perhaps we're not being successful and perhaps the interventions we made perhaps weren't the right interventions, or we can take some learnings out of them. But you can't do any of that if you're not clear about what your ambition is. So my biggest ask of this whole session is, can we put some quantification around this? Because if we don't, really, it's just aspirational. It's nothing more. And I'll leave it at that, because I thought the presentation was excellent, but I think there's still some work to do. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just clarify, is that you wanted smart objectives from them on that particular piece that you mentioned in the document?
Sorry, Chair. So if you look at these, if we take measure number 2, it says increase the proportion of working age adults qualified to at least level 2. So what's the current proportion? What do we want to get it to? By when? And what are the interventions we're making that gives us the confidence we should get to that? Because if you don't have any of that, what is it? It's just an aspiration. We don't want it to get worse, we want it to get better. But we don't know by what or by when, and we don't know what it is we're going to do that's going to help us achieve that. It's just putting a bit of rigour around it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Do you want to come back to that?
Thank you. And so to give you some reassurance, that is our intention. What we have with the plan is the starting point and a partnership that we are working together now to build that up as to how are we actually going to do it. The plan itself is quite light on how, and that was deliberate because it was about bringing the relevant people around the table to address how. And I think your point is fair. What is success? What does success look like? What does increase look like? And I'd like, we can come back at a later date and detail back on those measures in more detail, because just to be sure we are building those up, and behind the scenes there's a lot of task and finish groups that we are not directly involved in as a local authority, we're supporting, but there's other people involved in it, and we are looking at the how and what would success look like in that area.
Thank you, Gillian. Councillor Tyler?
Thank you, Chair. And but before I get into the question, just to go back on what John was saying about where pay levels are at the moment. I think, it doesn't matter whether you're in Kirklees or in Kensington. I think we're all seeing the same sort of energy price rises and the inflation going up as well. So I think broadly we should be aspiring to improve the level of pays no matter where we are. But I take you, what you were getting at, I understood. But yeah, I think the level of the problem is...
We don't necessarily need to beat ourselves up as much as perhaps sometimes we do.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. But we always must aspire. But I've got a fair few points on this. I'll start with the in the document. There's an Employment and Skills Commission that is to be established, and obviously the delivery of the Employment and Skills Plan. Is there any time frame on when that commission will come to be, and what form that would take as well, who the stakeholders would be, what that would ultimately look like? Some of the other questions on the Apprenticeship for All project, they were saying in the report you're not hitting ESF targets. What are the results that are measured to, how do they measure that, and how far off the piece are we? With regards to the levy transfer that's in place as well, how many local businesses do we know around here that are taking that up? On the apprenticeship grant, similar question that we've got in place here in Kirklees, is that getting sort of a reasonable uptake from local employers? Again, I appreciate this was post-16 looking at, but the work that is being done with schools and colleges, I'm very interested about, because when the high school that I went to were sponsored, their sixth form was sponsored by the Russell Group of universities. So they had an incentive to promote their students to go to, ideally, one of the Russell universities. But they had less of a, they didn't really offer much guidance when it came to pursuing apprenticeships. Similar to Graham, I'm an apprenticeship child myself as well, gone through that route and have reaped the benefits of that with a pretty good career, although I think I did mine a few years after you, Graham, just a few. Something I don't want to... no, nothing, mate, nothing. But something I do want to sort of a broader issue that we have locally is I also sit on the Industry Advisory Board for the university as well, and the discussion that is had at the last meeting I was out, they were talking about the various courses that they have and how to make them more flexible so that they're open to working people, going and joining them, similar to how I went through my degree, that sort of setup. And the question I asked was, surely like working with Kirklees College, that would be a good feed route for apprenticeships. And there was a resistance from both the universities and the employers in the room to work with Kirklees College. There have been, I appreciate that's not under our control, but there was a general bad experience that has been had locally. And rather than going to the provider that's literally round the corner from for training, they were going to, the name escapes me, but the successor to KITS, or what's followed on from KITS over that side. So that's where they were looking for their training provider and not on their doorstep, really. Is there any role that we can play as a council to try and mend those bridges, but try and get to the bottom of what's happened there, so that Kirklees College, the provider that's in our patch, is being used properly by, or is being seen more favourably by the local university and local employers as well? So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. Gillian.
Thank you. First of all, just the first point, where it mentions Employment and Skills Commission, that's been superseded by the partnership, and that actually came from the partners. They didn't want to be referred to as a commission. They didn't like the word commission. They felt it felt overreach. So that's an editing error that we can pick up on. But yeah, wherever it says Employment and Skills Commission, it is the partnership made up of the partners in the report. On the Kirklees Apprenticeships for All programme, it is a pilot programme when it comes to ESIF funding. It was the concept is a little bit different, the fact that it was using apprenticeship levy as match rather than using a cash match, and therefore the traditional results which European programmes were asked for kind of made to fit to this programme. So the results are very much around achieving a unit, so A level 2 and A level 3 of a qualification. So one of the reasons why we're behind the curve on doing that is simply down to the delay of collecting that evidence. We need a person to not only complete that unit, then get a certificate for that unit, and then provide us with a copy of it to be able to claim it as a result. However, when people are on an apprenticeship, they don't get individual unit certificates, they get a certificate for the apprenticeship. So it's a bit of an administrative ask. It's something that we're on with. It's something that by the end of the project, we're confident that we will be there, because we know that they're achieving. It's just about being able to prove that in the rules of the funding agreement. Now, on the levy transfer, we are currently working with 10 businesses across Kirklees where we are directly, as an LA, it's our levy that is funding their apprenticeships. However, what we are seeing, we've very much positioned our levy transfer as the pot of last resort. So what the instructions is that we've given to the Wicker programme is that if you could fund this levy through another scheme, then please fund it through another scheme so that we can ensure that everybody has a response. And we've seen a 300% increase in inquiries into that levy transfer pot. I don't have the exact figures with me at the moment in regards to numbers, but I can feed back on that, because it's an ever-moving feast in regards to inquiries and where it comes from. But the feedback from Wicker is that they've seen a massive uptake since the Kirklees Apprenticeship for All programme in the number of inquiries, and are able to do a lot of matching with that now. In regards to the apprenticeship grant, we currently have 180 inquiries that are in the system, and we expect at least 80% of them to pay out and claim the full grant. We've got capacity for more. We are running it as a pilot project, and in the report I talk about evaluating all of this activity to see where it's having an impact. We plan on including the grant in there and looking whether the wage subsidy is actually adding value and making a difference, to see whether it is a good use of the funds in that area. Just very quickly on the points around school and education. There's been a lot of progress in that in recent years, and a lot of it is down to the fact that Ofsted have recognised the importance of career development, and there's something called the Gatsby benchmarks, which schools are now measured on and in their progress. And we have C&K careers in the Kirklees district that are in a lot of our schools and a lot of our sixth forms, and are helping support our school in hitting those Gatsby benchmarks. It's impossible for them to hit the standard that they need to be in Gatsby without embracing careers education and engaging with businesses. So I see that as a real positive. But as Councillor Turner mentioned earlier on, it's not a quick win. It's not something that you can automatically see the results of straight away. That's something that we'll see the positive effects of in our future workforce and as they start entering into the workplace. And finally, in regards to our college and bringing our businesses together, apprenticeships is a commercial market. Businesses do have, well, employers do have a choice as to who they use as their apprenticeship provider as choice. Our college is engaging very well with businesses at the moment. They are working with our careers advisors in the district. They are open to conversations and adjusting their curriculum to meet business needs. However, there may always be other independent training providers that can provide more specialist support, and I think that should be encouraged as well. There is some industries that we have in Kirklees that are niche, and they need a provision that's niche for them as well. So very much through the partnership, we are bringing people like the Chamber of Commerce, the Textile Centre, the Kirklees Manufacturing Forum together with our education providers, which includes the college, and certainly the Skills Improvement Plan, which is ongoing and being developed at the moment. That will also allow for that to happen as well. I think I've covered everything there, but please let me know if not.
Thank you, Gillian. Councillor Tyler?
Yeah, I'm okay, just a thought there, because I take the point about your relations improving with the college, but when I did, my apprenticeship was with Kirklees College, and then when I'm in a room with engineers who are saying, no, we're not going to use Kirklees College, as I say, I'm not just coming here and saying that because I don't know what's happened there that's led to that breakdown, but that's clearly something at some point has happened there, which has turned a portion of industry, which isn't a niche industry, it's a very big industry in our area, off Kirklees College, and it would just be, I think it's would be prudent for us to find out what exactly has caused that. The other sort of plea I want to make as well, more to Kirklees as an employer rather than sort of the actual strategy itself, is or the policy itself, should I say, is something that was discussed at the industry board was that employers were wanting degree courses, training courses that take place outside of works time, because obviously employers don't want to lose an employee for a day. From a council perspective, if when we're training our staff, I would just like to put my personal views that strongly recommend that is not the model that we follow. I understand that's a provision that will be useful to some employees, but when I was going through it, having that day release where you can just be like, right, this is my day to study and learn, and I can cram all my cram my assignments in, I can do all my work on this day, and then carry out the rest in a more manageable pace going throughout the week, I think is the way to go for a learner. I understand that from a business point of view, and I understand for each learner it's different, but if there was any sort of thought being put into that about how we make apprenticeships work in Kirklees as an organisation, that's from my perspective, that's the experience I had. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tyler. Gillian, do you want to come back to that? Councillor Gillian and then Councillor Turner, or which way around?
I was just going to say, I literally need to go. If anybody's got any questions for me before I go, I'm happy to take them, but I do need to go. You all happy?
Yep, I think so. If not, we'll come back to you by email. Gillian, do you want to come back to Councillor Tyler?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it's just to offer some reassurances that we work very, very closely with our people services and on the apprenticeship strand of activity. There is a need for apprenticeships to be flexible. It's a competitive market. For us as an employer, we have to appeal to the people that we want to employ to work with us, and that needs that we need a variety of programs on offer, and our managers to flex to meet both the individual's needs but also the needs of the training providers. So I know with our people services we've got a framework of providers, some of which offer day release, some of which offer on-the-job assessment and training. To me, it's about finding that match. It's about ensuring that we can bring that together based upon what's best for the individual and best for the job that we're trying to fill in that area.
Thanks, Gillian. No, Councillor Taylor.
Just coming back on that relationship between businesses and the colleges. I know, so I did quite a lot of work in North Kirklees in the Dewsbury area with the local MP, and one of the issues that was picked up there that wasn't being particularly addressed. In North Kirklees, you've got quite a strong bed manufacturing industry, and they didn't feel there were any courses being offered through the local colleges that actually would help with their training needs. So that might be one to look at if that hasn't already been picked up. But again, it's about that, you talked about that niche, and you know, much more so in North Kirklees than in South Kirklees, but that is a big part of the industry over there. So making sure that we're understanding the skills needed within those roles and bringing together the bed manufacturers and the college to make sure there's something, because Pioneer House would be the ideal location for it, wouldn't it? To make sure that they're providing the courses there. So yeah, that might be one to just have a look at and pick up.
Gillian?
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is one of the things that's quite exciting about the local skills improvement plans and the fact it's being led by the Chamber of Commerce is about having the conversations with businesses about their skills needs. And it can be quite difficult. You know, often if you ask a business about what their future skills needs are, certainly in recent years, they'll be looking at what their current vacancies are. And we need to be able to ask the right questions to draw out what their needs are, not only now, but also what they foresee them being in 2, 5, 10 years' time, to help us develop the provision to access that, because it's not always easy in the funding arrangements that training providers have to pivot their provision to the needs. But the local skills improvement plan, they're a national product. They are something that is coming from the Department of Education that will give us the ability to have that evidence base from employers that will allow our training providers, including the colleges, to say, this is what we need to do, help fund us to do that. We also have a growing influence because of devolution and because of being part of a mayoral area. The adult education budget, which is primarily at lower skills, so it's primarily pre-level 3, we have a lot more freedom over that within the West Yorkshire area. We work very closely with the combined authority, and we know that where there is a business need, we can pivot the use of some of that funding to procure some extra additional training. And certainly bed manufacturing is something that's on our radar that we're working with the combined authority on to identify, is there a gap in provision, and if so, what can we do about that?
Councillor Taylor, do you have a follow-up question?
Firstly, I'm really pleased to hear that bed manufacturers are already on the radar, because I think that really is important in North Kirklees. I'm just a little reticent around we constantly talk about the Chamber of Commerce. My experience of them is that they're not necessarily representative of the businesses, and they tend to be people that perhaps have the time to attend meetings. And actually, therefore, if we're doing our engagement through them, we're probably not reaching the right people. I know it's a challenge, and I've said this in meetings before, because the people you want to meet are the really busy chief executives or the HR partners of the larger companies who probably don't have the time to meet with council. So it is a challenge. But I think if we're reliant on the Chamber of Commerce as being the representative of businesses, I think we're probably missing a huge trick. Certainly from bed manufacturers, they have their own organisations, and it's probably those kind of federations and industry bodies that probably are more effective in helping us understand the skills needs rather than a generic group of meeting attenders, if I'm being really brutal. Thank you.
Thank you. Gillian, do you want to come back to that?
I feel like I'm offering a lot of reassurance here, but I think it's important. We absolutely kind of take on board the point that the Chamber has a membership and has a limited membership. Through the local skills improvement plans, the Chambers are leading, but it's not about a membership project, and it's not about just engaging with members, it's about engaging with a much wider base. And they are working with the CBI and the Federation of Small Businesses, as well as the industry bodies, to ensure that. I sit on the board of the LSIPs. We've only had one meeting. It was only last week, so it's very early days. But that's the whole point of me attending there, is to ensure that the voice of Kirklees businesses is represented there, because what that end product will be a West Yorkshire plan. And actually, we need to ensure that the Kirklees voice is loud in there and all of our businesses are represented. And we're also offering practical support in that. The Chamber is a small organisation. If they are going to be able to go out and get the voices of these businesses, we can support them with that. And our colleges have also committed to support in that as well.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Just on that very point, again, the point I made earlier about the engagement with MPs, because what you'll find is the MPs, all of them, have very good links into the businesses in their areas. So actually, that probably is very useful conversations for you to have with all four of them, because the businesses will go to their MP for help and support. So it's a great way of finding, you know, sort of another way of getting that angle and that way in.
Thank you. I just had a couple of points as well in terms of some of the challenges that you mentioned for the actual the appetite for these sort of courses. I think there's some sort of myth busting exercise, because I think sometimes people think if I get a degree, it might be a quicker way to me to get into a reasonably comfortable job with a comfortable pay. How versus someone who does an apprenticeship, how long is that going to take me? Is that going to add an extra year in terms of my training? Is that going to add an extra year of, you know, studying? In terms of earning a living as well, I know obviously university is a lot more costly than doing an apprenticeship, because you can still earn a living on the side, so that's an added advantage. But the type of apprenticeships that you're offering as well, I think a lot of people might be worried about job security, especially in construction and other areas. So how do we kind of give that reassurance? You wanting people to do apprenticeships, but there's certain areas that can be quite challenging in this current climate. So how do we create that appetite? And I think apart from the bedding manufacturing industry, which is very popular in the north of Kirklees, transport is quite strong as well, and hospitality and eateries, and that's something I wonder if you'd consider as well. But those are my comments.
Thank you for your comments, and you know I agree with everything you say with that. And I think one thing that's really key in all of this, and particularly with our work with young people, is it is about transferable skills. Time and time again, employers come back to us, and yes, there is technical skills in certain sectors, but it's also about transferable skills and ensuring that apprenticeship frameworks and T-level frameworks address that and reflect that in the learning that they do, and the skills that people can get from being in work and learning from other people. A lot of employers say that they can build on that. They're not necessarily expecting people to come to them as the finished product, but if they've got transferable skills and soft skills, they can work with that and build it up to teach them the technical knowledge that's needed. There is a big job around myth busting, and it's not just necessarily for the people that we hope to go into apprenticeships, it's also the network around there. So very lucky to have C&K Careers in the Kirklees area, where we've got qualified professional careers advisors that can offer that advice not only to our young people but also to our parents and our carers that are looking after our young people and helping them make the decisions that they need to make for their future careers. But it's never something that's going to be a done job. It's a message that needs to be repeated and brought home, and we need to amplify some of the good news stories around there, and we need to shout about some of the success stories. We're using the Top 100 Careers Initiative as a way of showcasing some of the fantastic businesses that we have in the Kirklees district and some of the opportunities that we have. We recently launched the brochure on there, and we're looking to build on that over the next year. So at every careers event that we run, every outreach work that we've done, we've got something there that amplifies the opportunities that are available to people. But it's never going to be something that is done. It's just ensuring that we keep that momentum and keep building on it.
Thank you. And I think it's just, like you said, it's not an overnight journey, it's like a long course. But in terms of, you mentioned about post-16, in terms of the actual vacancies, there's two ways you can do apprenticeships. I'm aware that you can just go in and express an interest in study and go into an employer, they link you up and mentor you up. Is there opportunity whereby if you're going to do an apprenticeship, you go into almost a vacancy within the actual organisation, and then they train you up? How does it exactly work? Because there's a bit of
a lot of that is down to the role. An apprenticeship has to be linked through to a job role, and a lot of that is down to the employer making a decision as to what they need. And it's two strands to me with apprenticeships. There's a role for recruiting an apprentice where you are coming in and you're an apprentice and you are developing your skills in the job as you're working towards your qualification. And then there's a role for an apprentice for people that are in work to help them move on to the next stage of their career and upskill while they're in work. Part of the role of the programme that we have, the Kirklees Apprenticeship for All programme, is making employers aware of that and helping them decide what is the best option for them. Sometimes that may be that an apprenticeship isn't the right option. Sometimes it might be about saying you need to look at a different way of recruitment. But there's a raft of opportunities, and we may go in with the apprenticeship hat on, but actually we may come out with another solution for that employer. That might be looking to recruit from more diverse groups that they've never considered before. It may be about looking at industry placements. It may be looking at graduate placements or even T-levels, which are growing in their scope and their ability to do it. It's really about finding that best fit that's going to help the employer hit their ambitions, but also ensure that it's realistic, that what they're going to get, they're ready to support that, to make sure that it's a successful placement as well.
Thank you, Gillian. Any further questions or comments on that? Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
No, I'm Edward Highfield. I'm the Service Director
Yep.
for Gillian's area, but she's the expert, so the best thing I can do is shut up.
Thank you. Thanks, Gillian, for your presentation, and thank you for coming. And there's a couple of points that were made during the discussion in regards to coming back to us with a bit more detail around. Maybe we can have a discussion on that when we come to the next item in the work programme, and invite you back for further details on some of the things that were mentioned. But thank you so much. Thank you both. Thank you. So I'm conscious of time. I don't usually overrun. So we'll move on to item 10, which is the work programme. And that was updated work programme for 2022-2023 municipal year is attached to the agenda, which you have had a chance to consider. So do members have anything to add in respect of the work programme, or any comments or questions?
I'll raise this, yeah. I was under the impression the February item was going to be the bereavement services offering, and that this time it seems to have been an item not yet scheduled, and now it's the future of homes and neighbourhoods. What's able to just clarify what's happened there? That's
Yeah, that one was deferred due to changes in the strategy as to when they're bringing it forward. So they decided the best time would be to bring it after the new municipal year.
right. Okay. Do we know what the housing, homes, and neighbourhood item's going to be then? Because as I say, the other ones on there look like were agreed before. This one I'm not familiar with too much. I don't know.
So I know that on the future of housing, homes and neighbourhoods, previously there's been a, what do we call them, an ad hoc looking at the movement back into fully council control of what was K&H, but also focusing very strongly. Didn't it come through count? I've been at a meeting where, no, it was a cabinet. It was a cabinet in December where they brought through the final report, which was around the health and safety issues, which, you know, kind of, if you think of Grenville and all of that kind of broader, but a lot broader than that, because looking at, you know, sort of gas inspections and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I know that there is an intent, and there was a paper that came through Cabinet as well on the 21st of December or something, it was a very lengthy Cabinet, was around the setting up of, I can't remember the terminology, but a board that would have some council representative on it to do some oversight of the future of Kirklees homes and neighbourhoods, because when we brought it back in-house, in effect, there used to be a board that had council representation on it, and that ended, but then there was no other role where councillors perhaps got us involved. So I don't know whether it's that. Although isn't Jenny more the provision of housing? So like the provision of social housing, things like that. So whether it's...
Don't seem to. Oh, sorry, thank you. It just don't seem to tap. Not that it's an issue. It's all right for this to be go away and like ironed out. I don't mean to like make too big of a fuss of it, but yeah, I just think that one threw me for a loop a bit. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, maybe, Chair, through you, we could ask just if we could have an email that just tells us a bit more about what the agenda item is.
Yeah, sure. We'll get some clarity on that particular agenda work programme item. Okay. Any further comments or questions on the agenda items?
Just on that last discussion and that last debate that we had. So yeah, it would be worth scheduling. It probably will be in the new municipal year. Having them come back, because I'd be very interested in seeing a bit more detail around the plan and the measures and how that all fits together when it's ready. But then also I think maybe again in the new municipal year, it may be worth us thinking about a joint session with Children's to look at the skills and education across the whole landscape as a joint session perhaps. Because I do think that what you pick up at 16 partly is as a consequence of what did or didn't happen pre-16, isn't it? So,
that's point duly noted. So yeah, we'll bring that back and we'll look at that as well. Councillor Matthew?
Just again, a thought for the new municipal year. It would be handy to have an update, going back to trees, because of course I do, on the White Rose Forest itself, because various presentations we've had have skirted around the edge of it, but nobody's ever been able to answer any real questions about the White Rose Forest and how it's going, and where it is in its sort of stage. So if that would be something we could look into potentially bringing in next year, I would appreciate that, because I think it's a very important part of what we're doing going forward.
Still on trees. I think Graham said about wanting to bring something back about ash dieback. So probably that needs to be on the future programme whenever it's appropriate for them to bring that back as well.
So yeah, we can consider that as well in light of what you've said. Yep. Any further comments or questions? No? No? I'm looking, I'm checking. So that's the end of the meeting. I'm sure you'll be glad to know it has overrun, but I'm sure it was worth it. You made some great contributions, and thank you all for attending. Once in a while.